A woman with short brown hair sits at a table, looking up with a hint of surprise. Her surprise turns to shock as she learns some sudden news from a calm, black-haired woman. The brown-haired woman beams, congratulating her friend on the wedding and praising her wonderful boyfriend. The black-haired woman smiles sweetly, confirming that she will be at the wedding. With a small rustle, the brown-haired woman holds a white, wax-sealed wedding invitation. Reading the invitation, she remarks on the coincidence that her husband's name is the same, prompting loud laughter from her friend. The black-haired woman leans back confidently, telling Biola that it's no coincidence. Biola asks what she means, and is shown a wedding photo of the woman kissing her own husband, sparking horrified realization. The woman reveals they're marrying on their 6-year anniversary, as Biola's world darkens and her hand trembles, crushing the invitation. Revealing she is pregnant with Do-yoon's child, the woman demands congratulations, but Biola erupts in fury, calling her insane as a chair crashes down. Biola questions her humanity while a dark-haired man, Do-hyun, coldly refuses to grant her a divorce. Overwhelmed by betrayal, Biola breaks down in tears as a voice tells her to get a grip. The woman cruelly reveals she is legally married to Do-yoon, making Biola the mistress, and mocks her for believing he would ever register their marriage. A horrifying truth echoes in Biola's mind. He never loved her from the start, as she is consumed by despair. The woman coldly demands Biola get out of their lives, leaving her sobbing on the floor among scattered papers. As the woman walks away, Biola is left with the crushing realization that her life was a lie. Time becomes a blur for Biola. She quit her job and left everything behind after the incident. Hiding from the world, she distanced herself from everyone she knew. For 3 years, she has been running from that devastating moment, hiding in a lonely room. Resolving not to live in despair, she compares her tragic life to the heroine of a novel, The Countess of Elgrin. The novel tells the story of Count Eric's affairs and his wife Roze, who silently endures his cruelty. In her solitude, she read novels like this to escape the pain of her past. Suddenly, her apartment door bursts open and the ceiling collapses, causing her to scream in terror. As debris rains down, she desperately cries out for someone to save her. Trapped and terrified, she looks up, pleading for anyone to help. As blood splatters, she thinks that while she wished the world would end, this wasn't the ending she wanted. The scene shifts to a grand, sunlit mansion in a different world. A man in a formal vest accepts blame, as a doctor reports that a woman's fragile condition was worsened by a great shock. The doctor happily declares she's otherwise healthy, but bang! A sudden force interrupts him. With a whoosh, the doctor is sent flying across the opulent room. The doctor, now a tiny figure, complains about quitting his job as a pink-haired woman begins to stir. He rushes to her side, asking if Lady Wentz is all right, but she only looks at her hand in confusion. The newly awakened pink-haired woman stares at her own unfamiliar hands with wide, shocked eyes. The weeping doctor urges the madam not to strain her weak body as she looks down, utterly bewildered. An ornate frame introduces Roze Wentz, the only daughter of a fallen count family. The narration explains that Roze foolishly turned her back on her family to be with their mortal enemy, Eric. Over the doctor's concerned cries, she screams in denial, insisting she can't be Roze Wentz and that this must be a dream. Realizing this is no fairy tale, her past self recoils in horror at the thought of living such a painful life again. Her memory of dying under rubble surfaces as she thinks she'd rather have died than endure this. Tusk, a shirtless, black-haired man, leans over her, coldly asking if she's finally regained her senses. Waking in a daze, Roze apologizes, explaining she must have dozed off and was told to rest because it was that time of the month. The man scoffs at her excuse, cruelly reminding her that she actually collapsed from a miscarriage. Her eyes widen in pure shock as the devastating word echoes in her mind. Miscarriage. She realizes this must be the moment the original Roze remembered her past, and she internally fumes at the shameless man who offered no apology. He dismisses her grief, callously trying to initiate sex, and lamenting how long it took her to get pregnant only to miscarry. "No!" she screams, appalled by his actions right after his wife's miscarriage, and begs him to leave until she recovers. He grabs her throat, snarling that she's misunderstanding something. He coldly warns her to stay out of his affairs from now on, leaving her coughing and defeated. With a cruel smirk, the shirtless, black-haired man warns her not to forget what happened, sarcastically questioning if even an idiot can manage that. Slam! As the door closes, the pink-haired woman sits up in bed, clutching her throat in fear and distress. She thrashes in bed, internally screaming that she can't live with that trash Eric, and cursing the original Roze and the author of this crazy story. Outside the grand mansion, she wonders how this could even be possible. Now dressed, Roze looks out the window, wishing she had just one person to help her. Elsewhere, a group of maids gangs up on another, yelling at her for slacking off while they do her work, and demanding she get to it as she begs to be let go. Roz peeks through the window, wondering about the commotion as a brown-haired maid apologizes, explaining that a maid named Doana has been unstable lately. The blonde maid, Doana, furiously wishes she had her phone to film the others and sue them. The defiant blonde maid is brought before someone, announcing she has arrived as ordered. Roz sits peacefully, a gentle smile on her face. The blonde maid reacts in shock as Roz shushes her, realizing they are both trapped inside the novel together. Roz explains she's been confused ever since waking up, prompting the blonde maid to excitedly ask about the X-Dong incident, revealing she had an accident there too. The blonde maid is delighted they are together in this new world and proposes that they become friends. Roz considers this, thinking that perhaps meeting here is a lucky connection. As the two women walk together arm in arm, a thought emerges that being with Doana could change things. In a dark moment of reflection, Roz remembers her past life name, Lee Gyoru, given to her by her mother so she would never lose. The blonde woman smiles, asking Roz to remember the name Gyoru and suggesting they get along from now on. A painful memory surfaces for Roz of a brown-haired woman, her friend of 10 years, juxtaposed with the blonde maid's smiling, outstretched hand. The memory crystallizes. Her longtime friend of 10 years was the one who stole her husband. Back in the present, Roz compliments the lovely name Gyoru while pouring tea, but internally notes its rarity, still uncertain. Trying to confirm her suspicions, Roz asks the blonde maid, Gyoru, how old she is. Gyoru tearfully replies that she is 29, lamenting how unfair it is that she got married so young. Roz's expression hardens as she realizes this is definitely the same Gyoru, the one person she never wanted to see again, not even in death. Gyoru smirks, asking if they're the same age, and then demanding to know Roz's name. Roz gives a fake name, Kim Hana, which Gyoru finds unfamiliar, while Roz thinks to herself that it's her new identity. Roz recalls that because of Gyoru, she had to abandon her real name of over 20 years, Kim Byolha, remembering how quiet and friendless she used to be. Gyoru laments the cruelty of their past life grudge following them, then smoothly says Roz reminds her of a friend, making it nice to meet her. With a cruel smirk, Gyoru taunts her, recalling how pathetic Kim Byolha was on that day, able to do nothing but cry. Feigning ignorance, Gyoru asks Roz to explain the plot of the novel, claiming she knows nothing. Roz reflects that she would have innocently helped in the past, but now decides there's no need to tell her rival it's a tragic novel. With a cold smile, Roz informs her she's just a nameless extra, leaving Gyoru stunned and demanding to know who the main character is. Roz simply offers a serene, knowing smile in response. Gyoru points in disbelief, asking if Roz is the main character, and Roz calmly confirms that's how it turned out. Gyoru internally seethes, judging Roz's appearance as tacky and insisting she looks far better, believing she could have styled herself better. Dismissing Roz as the heroine, Gyro asks about Count Wen's, assuming the male lead must be predictable. Roz explains the plot. She fell for the handsome Count Eric at first sight and pursued him relentlessly. Gyoru scoffs, claiming she hasn't seen anyone particularly good-looking around the mansion. Roz assures her she'll understand when she sees him, admitting he's a bit cold to her, which piques Gyoru's curiosity. Internally, Roz sees through Gyoru's pretense of comfort, but deludes herself into believing her husband cares for her deeply, despite his coldness. Suddenly, Count Eric appears, looking weary and complaining that he hasn't slept due to work. Gyoru gasps in shock, covering her mouth as she sees the handsome Count for the first time. With a smile, Roz formally introduces the man as her husband, Count Eric de Wenz. Gyoru's eyes widen with a flash of greedy realization. Roz recognizes Gyoru's old habit of taking what's hers and offers her one last chance, wondering if she should intervene before Gyoru ruins her life by pursuing Eric. Gyoru gracefully curtsies, introducing herself to the Count with a polite, "It's a pleasure to meet you." She introduces herself as Doana, a close friend of Roz, prompting a surprised look from Eric. As Gyoru claims they were childhood friends who had forgotten each other, Roz grimly narrates that Gyoru is the one sealing her own tragic fate. Gyoru immediately begins to flirt with the Count, telling him she's heard he's an amazing man, and it's true, making him blush. Her mind races as she assesses his handsome face, fit body, and vast wealth, concluding he was practically prepared just for her. Gyoru turns to Roz with a smug smile, asking if she isn't better suited to be the Countess, declaring that the world revolves around her in this life and the last. As Gyoru clings to Eric, Roz places her foot on the table and announces she's not feeling well and will be heading in first. As Roz walks away, a man cries out for the madam while another calls her name, "Roze!" Roz wonders why her rival, Gyoru, had to fall into this novel with her, recalling that she thought she'd never see her again, but decides that letting the two of them be together might be for the best, as she resolves to escape this place. Okay. Roz laughs, realizing that fate wants her to get rid of two pieces of trash at once. Leaning back with a confident smile, she vows that she won't be a pushover like she was before. Roze recalls the original story, remembering that she was the daughter of a fallen noble family because she had begged to marry Eric. She remembers how her parents cut ties with her, leaving her to kneel before Eric alone. Because of this, the novel has little information about her family, and she suspects they would turn her away even if she found them. She closes her eyes in despair, realizing that if she gets a divorce, she'll likely end up homeless. Slam! She slams her hand down, shouting that she can't let that happen and will get divorced to live an amazing life. With new resolve, she decides that to survive in this world, she needs information and must begin studying immediately. Roze opens a door to find two maids, politely asking for a moment of their time as one asks how she can help. She requests to see the butler, and a maid confirms she is asking for Mr. Gwen. While sipping tea, Roze confirms to the butler, Mr. Gwen, that she is indeed asking for a tutor. The butler politely asks the madam for the reason behind her sudden request. Roze explains that, as the Countess, she feels obligated to understand how the world works, especially to enter high society. The butler muses on her past hardships, noting her newfound determination to look forward instead of relying on her husband. He agrees to speak to the Count on her behalf, much to Ross's relief, as she was worried she'd have to find a salon on her own. As Roze leaves, she notices the strange atmosphere among the servants, just as Gyoru's flirtatious voice echoes, "Oh, come on, Count," not in broad daylight. Realizing they're both the same after all, Roze scoffs at the sight of Gyoru and Eric together, knowing that woman wouldn't dare approach her anyway. With a determined gaze, she dismisses them, declaring that she is going to make a fresh start from now on. The scene shifts to a bright window framed by white roses, marking a quiet moment of transition. A shirtless Eric asks what she wanted, and the butler informs him that the madam requested a governess. Eric scoffs, remembering how she never lifted a finger when he previously told her to do something. The butler, ignoring Eric's attitude, asks what kind of teacher he should call from the list he's prepared. Eric coldly tells the butler to handle it himself and not to bother him with such matters, leaving the older man to accept his dismissal. Later, Eric lies with Gyoru, who playfully thanks him for letting her sleep in. Eric glares at the lingering butler, warning him to leave and stating that he doesn't share what's his. The flustered butler offers a hasty apology and quickly makes his exit. The heavy door closes, sealing the couple inside the room. Eric leans in to kiss Gyoru, asking if she's still not satisfied. Gyoru reflects on their night together, thinking that while no one's perfect, he was simply amazing. Elsewhere, Roze slams her papers in frustration, complaining about the immense amount of material she has to memorize for her very first lesson. Her lesson reveals that her family, the Count of Serviol, was defeated in a power struggle and only survived thanks to Grand Duke Artyom before losing their power. Roze slumps in her chair, appalled that she was ignorant of this, and married Eric, the very man who ruined her family, realizing her parents must have found her pathetic. Her tutor continues, explaining that after the emperor's death, the crown prince's uncle took the throne, which was for the best as the prince was a troublemaker. The tutor describes the crown prince as a ruthless man without compassion, warning Roze to never get involved with him. Roze recalls the prince was executed in the novel, and while she doubts she'll ever meet him, she decides it's better to be careful. A maid arrives to announce that Ross's requested carriage is ready, reminding her of her plan to visit an auction and see Eric's gift. Internally scolding the original Roze for being an idiot, she forces a smile and agrees to leave quickly. On a snowy night, Roze stands outside a grand estate, her thoughts turning to a letter and a beautiful sapphire accessory. Flashes of memories and future events appear. Eric grabbing her, the sapphire jewelry shattering, and the blonde prince holding her close. Arriving at the auction, Roze spots the blonde-haired man from her history lesson the ruthless crown princess alone. Roze approaches the prince, taps on his chair, and informs him that he is sitting in her seat. The blonde man looks up with a sigh, questioning when the auction started having assigned seats. Suddenly, another man rushes to Ross's side, grabbing her arm in alarm and telling her to wait as she looks on in confusion at her bidding number, 38. The man leans in and whispers that her number is for bidding, not for a seat, and that she can sit wherever she likes. As the blonde prince watches, Roze freezes in embarrassment, realizing she just tried to kick someone out of their seat for no reason. The prince stands and walks away as the man with Roze apologizes for her mistake, explaining that she isn't used to places like this. Stunned, Roze flinches as the black-haired man grabs her. The man pulls her back, thinking he must smooth things over, as Roze offers a panicked apology to the stoic blonde man. Bowing deeply, Roze sincerely apologizes for her ignorance and begs for his forgiveness. Believing he won't cause a scene, Roze decides to quietly slip away while she has the chance. The blonde man suddenly commands her to sit, leaving Ross stunned and confused before he repeats the order more forcefully. Ross cringes at his tone, clearly unnerved by the unexpected command. She reluctantly agrees and sits beside him, deciding it's best to play invisible to avoid angering him further. The auctioneer hypes up the crowd, declaring that money is all that matters, and the highest bidder will win incredible treasures. The bidding begins as two nobles shout competing offers of 30 and 35 million res. Ross watches in amazement, realizing the noble's wealth is on a completely different level as they casually spend vast fortunes. Wow. The auctioneer unveils a brilliant sapphire necklace, dramatically announcing it as Luna's tear. The crowd erupts in a bidding war as the price for the necklace skyrockets to 80 million res. Ross internally scoffs, remembering the necklace is a fake and recalling how Eric was berated after purchasing it. The blonde man calmly raises his paddle, number 30, and places a staggering bid of 100 million res. As the bids continue to climb at a dizzying pace, Ross grows panicked, exclaiming how fast the price is rising. Feeling a sense of dread, she decides she can't just sit back and watch, convinced it will lead to disaster. The blonde man prepares to raise his bid to 130 million. In a desperate move, Ross grabs his arm, shouting at him to stop and not buy the necklace. He asks what she's doing as she grips his hand, insisting that buying the item would be throwing money away. The blonde man looks down at her coldly, questioning what his spending has to do with her. Startled by his icy tone, Ross flinches back. She inwardly curses her meddlesome habit of acting on impulse. Composing herself, Roz confidently declares that the necklace is a fake, prompting the blonde man to question her knowledge and accuse her of insulting the nobility. She quickly clarifies that she isn't, suggesting the other nobles are likely unaware of the forgery themselves. The blonde man looks on skeptically, warning her that she will pay a heavy price for interfering if she's wrong. Suddenly, a voice calls out, "Countess Wentz," and Roz turns in shock, wondering how someone knew who she was. Thump! The auctioneer declares the Terror of Luna sold for an astonishing 3.6 billion less. A slight smile plays on the blonde man's lips as he looks at her, pondering his next move. Convinced she'll die if she doesn't do something, Roz frantically decides to bet her life on her claim. He questions her offer to bet her life, as she internally panics, realizing she meant to say her neck, not her entire life. Flustered, she quickly tries to take back her words, waving her hands in denial. The blonde man smiles, appreciating her sincerity as he reaches for her. Roz continues to stammer, trying to explain that wasn't what she meant. A voice in the crowd identifies the blonde man as Grand Duke Artian as he walks away. Later, Grand Duke Artian reflects on the auction, feeling that something is still fishy about the fake, and wondering if he should have ignored it. He decides that, if necessary, he can simply buy the real item from its new owner for a bit extra. An older woman recalls seeing Ross, realizing she is the spitting image of Lady Serviat. In a flashback, the woman remembers trying to get a young Ross to greet someone, but the small child refused, hiding behind her dress. A young blonde boy, the prince, is presented, but little Ross tearfully declares he is not the prince she imagined. The young prince stands silently as the little girl continues to insist that he isn't the real prince. Back in the present, Grand Duke Artium smiles at the memory, recalling how even when she cried, she still had a cute face. Meanwhile, Ross buries her face in her hands as a man calls out the name Cern. Cern asks a distraught Ross if she made a mistake with the Grand Duke, and she miserably agrees. Now identified as Escort Knight Cern, he smiles warmly and reassures Ross not to worry, vowing to protect her. Later, Roz asks Cern how a fake item could have made its way into the auction. She explains her theory. The host was deceived, and someone must have switched the real item with a counterfeit. Huh? Cern is completely shocked by her insight, and demands to know how she figured that out. Shiroz quickly places a finger on his lips to silence him. She claims she saw it in a dream, knowing the truth is unbelievable. Cern remains skeptical but accepts her excuse, privately wondering if she's alright as their carriage departs. The scene transitions to a grand, sunlit mansion surrounded by lush gardens and blooming flowers. At her desk, Ross quietly reviews documents when a cheerful voice calls out her name. A blonde maid leans over her shoulder, playfully asking what she is always staring at. Roz looks away with a sigh, dismissing the question by saying she is simply bored from doing nothing. The maid observes that it's not like anyone else in the manor keeps Roz company. She sympathetically suggests Roz must be lonely and wishes the Count were a bit kinder to her. The maid then notices Ross's earrings, complimenting them, and guessing they must be a gift from Eric. Roz brightly confirms they are a gift, prompting the maid to happily announce that she recently got a boyfriend. Roz's pleasant facade drops as she realizes the maid's smile isn't joy, but the smug look of superiority from someone secretly taking her husband. Snapping back to the present, Ross offers a flustered apology, claiming she just wanted a closer look at the maid's pretty earrings. The maid preens, smugly wondering how her boyfriend managed to pick earrings that suit her so perfectly. When Roz asks how they met, the maid leans in conspiratorially, claiming it was as if fate pulled them together. She closes her eyes blissfully, declaring that her boyfriend is absolutely perfect. In her private thoughts, the maid reveals she has a perfect plan to become the Countess and will not fail in this lifetime. A flashback shows her past life, where she was disowned for stealing her mother's husband and came to regret her marriage. Revealed to be Gyoru, she believes being possessed into the novel is a divine chance to live up to her true potential, while Roz privately notes she must handle her own husband better. Roz smiles and thanks Gyoru for her concern, while a flashback reveals Gyoru once scorning a friend named Doana and her own past foolishness. Maintaining her smile, Roz internally wonders just how pathetic she must look right now. Their conversation is interrupted as the butler enters, announcing that a letter has arrived for her ladyship. Roz reads the letter with a puzzled expression, knowing she shouldn't have any connections in high society. Thwack. The letter is suddenly snatched right out of her hands. Yoru now holds the letter, her eyes wide with excitement as she wonders if it's a high society party invitation. After explaining what the invitation is, Roz coolly demands that Gyoru hand it over. Yoru excitedly asks to come along, declaring it's what friends are for, but Roz simply offers a knowing, cynical smile. With a sweet but firm tone, Roz crushes Gyoru's hopes by stating that only nobles are allowed in, and maids can't enter. As Gyoru reels from the rejection, Roz twists the knife by asking if she'd like to attend as her personal maid, only to have the door slammed in her face. Gyoru seethes with rage as Roz feigns innocence, asking if she's upset and claiming she was only thinking of her. Roz holds the letter to her lips, repeating her insincere concern with a glint in her eyes. Gyoru forces a smile, denying she's upset while admitting to being a little disappointed, all while privately thinking Roz is infuriating. Maintaining her false smile, Gyoru notes that Roz is clearly angry and pointedly asks who sent the invitation. Roz's eyes widen in shock as she reads the sender's name, Grand Duke Artem, leaving her to wonder why he would contact her. She reflects that she and the Grand Duke never crossed paths in the original story, but now he's inviting her to his salon after their auction encounter. Roz realizes the invitation is addressed only to Countess Wentz, suspecting it must be about the fake Tears of Luna necklace. She recalls that another of the famed necklaces, gifted to the Empress, also turned out to be a fake, and assumes the Grand Duke must have heard the news. A wave of panic hits Roz as she remembers not only talking him out of buying the necklace, but also that he is fated to die soon. Shaking her head to clear her thoughts, Roz decides to view the invitation as an opportunity to observe the social scene. Gyoru watches Roz's changing expressions, realizing she can't attend with her and refusing to go as a mere lackey. Undeterred, Gyoru thoughtfully schemes, convinced there must be another way for her to get into the party. FWAH. With a determined grin, she flings open the doors to Roz's wardrobe. Gyoru pulls out a light green dress, sneering that everything is tacky and vowing to replace it all when she becomes the Countess. Holding the dress against herself, she decides she'll just ask the Count to take her, as she'll have to meet society's elite eventually anyway. She poses, smiling brightly as she imagines how much better the dress looks on her. Digging deeper into a drawer for more treasures, Gyoru is surprised to find a tiny pair of baby shoes. She scoffs while holding one of the shoes, wondering why Roz would keep something so useless after her miscarriage. As a baby's cry echoes in her memory, Gyoru dismisses motherhood, thinking it wouldn't be so bad since nannies do all the work. Suddenly caught by Roz, Gyoru quickly fabricates an excuse, claiming she was just looking to borrow something to wear. Gyoru appeals to their friendship, saying they should help each other, while Roz internally admits she couldn't care less about losing old things. Suddenly, with a determined cry, Roz lunges forward and grabs Gyoru. "What is the meaning of this?" Gyoru shouts, as a flustered Roz apologizes but insists that she absolutely cannot have this one item. Roz looks down with tears in her eyes at a golden hairpiece she's reclaimed. Gyoru scoffs, dismissing the gift, and bragging that she's already received 3 from him, as she internally brands Roz as utterly charmless. Gyoru leans in conspiratorially, offering to ask the Count for the item on Roz's behalf and boasting that he might listen to her. A flashback reveals Gyoru in bed with the Count. She explains that as his personal maid, she spends more time with him than Roz does, and smugly claims he's actually a very affectionate person. Roz's hand clenches into a tight fist as she internally fumes, knowing Gyoru is a master at getting under her skin by highlighting the Count's coldness toward her. Making a hasty excuse that she left something in the study, Roz walks away, thinking to herself that the real Roze would have been devastated by Gyoru's words. As she departs, Roz coolly reflects that unfortunately for Gyoru, she is not the real Roze. The heavy, ornate doors of the study click shut behind her. Wiping a tear from her eye, Roz resolves to let Gyoru keep smiling and wanting everything she has. Entering the study, she discovers papers scattered chaotically across the floor. She sighs at the mess as she begins to gather the strewn documents. While organizing the papers, she wonders aloud if the wind blew them everywhere. A shocking passage reveals a plot to kill the Grand Duke in a definitive way that leaves no room for doubt, unlike the former emperor who was suspected of being poisoned. Reading on in horror, Roze discovers the plan is to use a recent incident to destroy Grand Duke Artem's reputation, so that no one will oppose his execution. She recoils in utter shock, dropping the papers as the terrifying words sink in. Collapsing to the floor in a panic, she realizes they're targeting the Grand Duke and frantically debates whether to warn him or save her own life. Bang! The doors are suddenly thrown open by a dark-haired man. The Count storms in, angrily demanding to know what Roze is doing in his study after being told by a girl named Doana. Thinking fast, Roze turns from an open window with a bright, innocent smile. She calmly explains she came for a book and found his papers scattered by the wind, all while telling herself to act natural. The Count eyes her suspiciously, noting her hurried demeanor and offering to help clean up, causing Roze to tense up. Whap! As he reaches for a document, Roze snatches it away, yelling at him to get his hand off. He furiously questions if she read the paper before demanding to know why she was in his study without permission. Though startled, Roze calmly lies that she has her private lessons in the study and came in without thinking. She continues her excuse about closing the window, and the Count internally concedes that he did tell her she could do as she pleased. Frustrated, the Count admits he was careless, but forbids her from ever entering the study again, letting her off with a warning. As Roze worries about her lessons, the Count tells her to rest her injured hand, and that he'll see her later before leaving. With a sigh of relief, Roze is left alone to ponder her next move concerning Grand Duke Artem. That evening, Roze and the Count sit at opposite ends of a long table, eating dinner in a tense silence. The Count glances thoughtfully at Roze from across the table. He proposes a trip together in a week, but Roze coldly asks why he doesn't take his mistress instead. Wondering if he's trying to apologize for hurting her hand, she declines the offer, stating she already has plans. The Count is baffled by her behavior, recalling how she always made a fuss about her birthday and wondering why she's pretending not to know about the trip he suggested. Roze explains that her plans involve an invitation she received from Grand Duke Artem. Clatter! The Count drops his fork in shock, demanding to know if the Grand Duke sent an invitation to her alone. He stares at her intently, repeating his question about the invitation being just for her. Roze confirms it's correct, looking puzzled by his intense reaction. He points accusingly, interrogating her about what kind of connection she could possibly have with the Grand Duke, whom she's never met. Internally annoyed, Roze waves it off as nothing major, explaining she met him at the auction while shopping for his gift. The Count is taken aback, finding it strange she'd buy him a gift after pretending not to know his birthday. He smugly concludes that she's just pretending not to care to get his attention and generously decides to let it slide. The Count mulls over the Grand Duke, inviting only Roze to a banquet, but ultimately decides the Duke's motives don't matter. With a charming smile, he suggests they go on their trip another time, announcing that he'd like to attend the Grand Duke's banquet as well. A sinister smile crosses his lips as he thinks of the party as a grand finale for the Duke. A flashback shows Gyoru walking down a hall, recalling how she only visited the Count a few times when she couldn't sleep. In the memory, the Count embraces Gyoru, telling her to find him when she needs to, while she privately scoffs at him being just a low-ranking knight. An irritated Gyoru shoves another maid aside, complaining that she's late for a summons. Gyoru, now identified as Doana, bursts into the Count's room, but he sternly chastises her for being late. Doana blames a sudden errand, but the Count reminds her she's assigned exclusively to him and shouldn't be doing anything else. Feigning innocence, Doana says the Countess gave her the errand, asking how she could possibly disobey the lady of the house. The Count dismisses the topic of his wife, pulling Doana into an embrace and telling her to do exactly as he says. Back in the present, 4 days before the banquet, Roze studies a list of nobles, wishing she had cameras to know their faces. Roze strategizes for her first society party, identifying Duchess Bella and Eric's mother, Tertia, as two people to watch, though she knows Tertia already dislikes her. Frustrated, she collapses onto her desk, lamenting over the secret document and wishing she were a clever protagonist who could easily solve such problems. The Count startles her from behind, remarking that she was so lost in thought she didn't even notice him walk in. As he reaches toward her with a gloved hand, she looks up at him with a startled expression. He pulls his hand back abruptly, clarifying that he wasn't reaching for her hand. Pointing at a gift on her desk, he demands she hand over the birthday present he knows she bought for him, leaving her to wonder why he's suddenly asking for it. Roze claims she couldn't prepare a gift, but the Count points to the box, calling her out on the lie. Slap. The Count grabs her arm in a rage, furious that she'd ignore his birthday yet prepare a gift for the Grand Duke, accusing her of disgracing the family name. Stunned, he holds his cheek where she slapped him and demands to know what she thinks she's doing. Roze passionately defends herself, explaining that she's ignored by society and simply wants to bring a thank you gift to the one person who invited her. Clutching the present to her chest, she reflects on how the original Roze struggled so desperately just to earn Eric's love. As their carriage rumbles along, they sit at opposite ends in a deeply uncomfortable silence. Resigned to the awkward ride, Roze prepares to step out of the carriage, only to trip on her own elaborate shoes. She panics as she falls forward, terrified of getting her dress dirty before she even arrives. She realizes with dread that if she falls, she'll have to go home and miss the banquet entirely. Just as she's about to hit the ground, a blonde man in a formal uniform catches her in his arms. Looking up, she's shocked to see Grand Duke Artem, who smiles and greets her as Countess Wentz. As she thanks him and he offers his arm as an escort, the Count suddenly appears, grabbing her hand and declaring that his wife doesn't need one. The Count pulls Roze to his side, accusingly telling the Grand Duke that his concern suggests an interest in his wife. With a firm grip, the Count seizes the Grand Duke's wrist, stopping him from reaching for Roze. The Grand Duke smiles coolly, replying that he's only offering help because the Count himself seems so uninterested. The Count roughly shoves Roze's injured hand, causing her to cry out in pain. The Grand Duke admonishes the Count for his cruelty, telling him he should show a little concern for his wife when she's clearly hurt. With a menacing look in his eye, the Count pulls Roze away, announcing he'll spend some quality time with his wife before they leave. The Grand Duke watches them go, thoughtfully suggesting the Count should tend to his other distinguished guests. Leaning in close, the Count whispers a threat, admitting he's playing the part of a gentleman, but would rather cut out the Duke's insolent tongue. He dismisses the Grand Duke as an immature cub, warning him not to draw attention to himself at the banquet. As the Count departs, the Grand Duke watches him leave, seething, "That pompous bastard!" The Count turns back and points commandingly at Roze, ordering her to return to the mansion and wait for him without making a scene. He walks off, abandoning her at the entrance, leaving her to wonder what she's supposed to do now. Standing forlornly beside an attendant, Roze can't believe she's been forced to enter the grand banquet hall all alone. As the announcer presents Countess Roze of House Wentz, she takes a deep breath and tells herself not to be nervous. A woman with brown hair holding a red fan smirks from the crowd, cattily remarking on Roze's arrival. Roze stands isolated as the cruel whispers of other guests surround her, questioning why she's there and judging her for having no pride. A stylized credit page briefly interrupts the story's flow. Walking through the sea of judging eyes, she finds that making friends is proving to be much more difficult than she had imagined. With determined steps, she walks across the grand hall, refusing to give up just yet. Approaching a refreshments table, she decides her first move is to get something to eat and wait for an opportunity to present itself. As she reaches for a drink, her eyes widen in surprise at something just out of view. Grand Duke Artem appears before her, holding out a glass of champagne with a gentle smile. He touches a pin on his uniform, a thoughtful expression on his face. Realizing he must have remembered her injury from earlier, she smiles gratefully and thanks him for catching her fall. He dismisses her thanks with a smile, but then asks a pointed question. How did she know the moon tier necklace was a fake? Roze frets, knowing she can't possibly admit the truth that she read about it in a novel. Thinking fast, she lies that she'd heard the real moon tier glows red under lights, and the auction piece didn't, surprising him with her simple reasoning. She tries to end the conversation by stating there's only one authentic necklace, and asking him to just leave it at that. As music fills the hall, she decides she needs to escape, before the situation becomes any more complicated. She curtsies and wishes the Duke a good evening, turning to make her exit. He stops her with an outstretched hand, asking her to dance with him before she leaves. Much to her surprise, looking around nervously, she desperately tries to think of a way out of the dance, wishing she could find Eric. A man with dark hair approaches Roze, asking if she's looking for her husband, before snidely adding that he's busy with another woman. Now dancing with Grand Duke Artem, she looks into his eyes and internally fumes that her husband is useless. The Grand Duke smiles charmingly as she internally frets about her lack of dance practice, having never learned in Korea. As he steadies her after a near fall, she looks up in surprise and wonders if he's being considerate. A romantic montage shows the two of them dancing gracefully, lost in the moment together. After the dance concludes, she curtsies politely, thanking the Duke for his time. Nearby, noble women gossip cruelly, mocking her clumsy dancing and questioning if she's even a proper debutante. As she walks away from the dance floor, the women continue to whisper that the Count must be exhausted by her. Thump! The Count suddenly grabs her arm, furiously demanding to know why she's dancing with the Duke instead of keeping a low profile. He continues his tirade, accusing her of desperately trying to get his attention with the dance. Her hand trembles as she realizes with dismay that he still sees her as a woman desperate for his affection. She glares at him with a look of defiance, the moment hanging in the tense air between them. He suddenly pulls her into a rough embrace, taunting that this is what she likes, while she internally recoils at his madness. Leaning in close, he smugly says he understands her frustration, asking if she missed him since it's been 3 weeks. Looking away in disgust, she makes the excuse that they've both had too much to drink. Declaring that she's going to rest, she turns to leave while the Count stares after her in shock. He yells, "Wait!" but she ignores him, hurrying away into the night. Running through the garden, she reflects that something feels off, as if he's been avoiding her lately. The Count watches her retreat, annoyed that things were getting interesting, while the maid Doana smirks from the background. He smirks to himself, deciding not to dwell on it, and to focus on his plans instead. Overcome with disgust, she sits on a bench when suddenly she gasps for air, choking and crying for help. She collapses, hearing a dying sound and frantically trying to move, wondering if this is her tragic novel fate. Her vision darkens as she panics, determined not to let her second life end so senselessly. Grand Duke Artem steps out from the shadows, cautiously calling out to her. He rushes to her side, his hand covered in blood, asking if she's okay as she wonders if he killed someone. He pulls back his blood-stained hand, acknowledging it's bad manners to offer it to her. She looks at him with suspicion, bluntly accusing him of having killed someone. The Grand Duke is amused by her accusation, while she explains that she heard a scream. He stands coolly, reflecting that a death at his own party would only harm his reputation. Looking at his bloody hand, he concedes that his appearance understandably led to her conclusion. With a reassuring smile, he invites her to come with him so he can show her the truth. He leads her to a clearing littered with bloodstains, where she asks him what happened. He explains that he just saved Marquise Bled, who was being attacked by a monster. A flashback shows him fighting a vicious beast as he explains the blood splattered on him, and that the creature fled when he heard her. Just then, guards arrive, with their leader shouting that the Duke is a murderer and ordering his arrest. An older man, Duke Felice, emerges with a smug look, declaring he knew Duke Arthium would go too far one day. Duke Felice condemns him for killing a close friend of His Majesty, as Duke Artem listens with a grim expression. Duke Artem's eyes narrow, as he realizes the entire situation was a deliberate trap. He instinctively steps in front of Roze, shielding her as the guards close in. Stepping forward with newfound resolve, Roze prepares to speak in his defense. Duke Felice points an accusing finger, demanding to know what right she has to interfere. Roze boldly addresses the crowd, declaring that she witnessed the Duke saving Marquis Bled from a monster. What? Duke Felice is completely stunned, stammering in disbelief that there was a witness. Onlookers whisper in confusion, having only gathered because they heard something had happened to the Duke. Duke Felice eyes Roze suspiciously, questioning why she was out in the garden with the Duke instead of at the banquet. He gestures to her dirty dress, confident that she'll back down to protect her husband's reputation. Roze realizes he's trying to discredit her and dismiss her, along with the accused Duke. Feigning distress, she covers her face in sobs, claiming she got lost in the garden after coming out with her husband. In a dramatic retelling, she explains a monster appeared and the Duke saved her, claiming she'd be dead otherwise, prompting a furious Duke Felice to demand where the monster went. Duke Artem stammers an excuse, claiming the monster disappeared while he went to fetch help for the Marquis. Roze covers her mouth, hiding a sly, triumphant smile. The Duke stifles a laugh, clearly amused by her quick-witted performance. In a furious flashback, Duke Felice curses his men, revealing he'd ordered them to leave no witnesses. As the crowd murmurs their belief in the Duke's innocence, a sweating Duke Felice panics, wondering how to deal with this unexpected monster twist. Duke Felice formally thanks Roze, who internally recalls that he's a powerful and ruthless figure who will eventually betray her family. Suspecting her own husband is the true culprit, Roze pointedly asks Duke Felice to give her regards to Count Wentz. In the quiet garden, she reflects that while they survived the immediate crisis, the danger is far from over. Annoyed, Roze wonders why Grand Duke Artem is still following her as she tries to walk away. Ugh. She stops abruptly on the garden path, her patience wearing thin. He leans in close, telling the startled Roze that he's just curious about her. He asks why she chose to believe and help him when she could have simply walked away from the whole mess. She remembers his fearsome reputation, but also recalls that he, in turn, had shown faith in her. Touched by the memory, she smiles with genuine warmth. He listens intently as she explains her reasoning. She explains with a confident smile that she was simply returning the favor in her own way. Gently touching her cheek, he promises to grant any request she has, as she is the one who saved his life. She recoils in embarrassment, insisting that wasn't her motivation for helping him at all. Seizing the opportunity, she grabs his arm and desperately asks for his help in getting a divorce. The Duke is surprised by her request, though he privately acknowledges that her husband Eric is a terrible man. She explains with determination that she wants to correct her foolish mistakes and finally live her life differently. As he smirks playfully at her declaration, she insists that she is being completely serious. He takes her hand, agreeing that it's a wise decision that will surely please her parents. He asks about her connection to the Earl of Serviat, and she confirms they have a business relationship. Her expression becomes somber as she is lost in thought. She remembers how her parents had lovingly waited 3 long years for her return, despite the foolish choices she made. With a hopeful smile, she asks him to send word to her parents that she will visit them soon. He asks when she plans to file for divorce, and she firmly replies, as soon as possible. He explains that the divorce process is quite simple these days, requiring only signed papers, and muses that there's not much he can do to help. She looks up with an uncertain expression, realizing her path forward isn't so simple. In a surprising turn, she bows her head and asks if he could lend her some money. He bursts into laughter at her unpredictable request, while in the distance, her husband, the Count, watches them with a dark expression. A furious voice suddenly shouts, "Roze!" startling them both. The Count storms towards them, demanding to know what kind of mess she's making now. He threatens to leave without her, but seeing the mark on his neck and his disheveled shirt, Roze realizes exactly what he's been up to. Putting on a smile for the Duke, she says she has to go, but asks if they can continue their talk later. He agrees, promising to send someone to her family's estate soon to make arrangements. She panics, frantically waving her hands and pleading with him not to. Fearing her husband's obsessive jealousy, she decides it's safer if she makes contact with the Duke herself. Waving a quick goodbye, she runs off to catch up with her husband. Her voice echoes from the trees, calling out for Eric to wait for her. Grand Duke Artem watches her go, a serious and contemplative look on his face. He mulls over her strange request for money, wondering if she's serious or just finding an excuse to stay connected with him. Standing alone in the forest, he reflects on how unexpectedly she behaves, despite being so sharp. He recalls the chaotic scene, impressed that she remained calm and didn't even scream. Rustle. As he stands in thought, an attendant approaches from the darkness, announcing his presence. Noting his enemies are getting bolder, the Duke orders his man to clean everything up, leaving no loose ends. With a slight smile, he adds an order to have someone watch over the Countess, acknowledging that she saved his life. Later, back at his residence, the Duke looks completely drained and frustrated. A red-haired aide smirks while reporting a letter from the palace, but the Duke dismisses it, clearly waiting for a different message. The red-haired aide reports to the Grand Duke, stating that, aside from the letter, there is nothing else of note. When the Grand Duke asks about visitors, the aide reminds him he gave orders to turn everyone away, causing the Duke's eyes to widen in shock. He leans forward anxiously, asking if they actually turned people away because of his frustrated command. The aide reassures him that no one has come by, not even an ant. Elsewhere, a nervous Roze, disguised in a brown cloak and blonde wig, clasps her hands together anxiously. Standing outside a grand gate, she worries that the Grand Duke won't recognize her in her disguise and will throw her out. She gasps, imagining an even worse outcome. In a frantic daydream, she imagines the Grand Duke yelling at her, throwing coins in her face, and telling her to get lost. Shaking off her fears, she decides she's come too far to turn back and calls out to the guards. A brown-haired guard approaches, demanding to know why she is loitering. She stammers that she's here to deliver an item to the Grand Duke on behalf of her master, surprising the guard. As she speaks with the guards at the gate, the Duke's red-haired aide appears, looking down at the scene. With a welcoming smile, the red-haired aide gestures for her to enter, saying, "This way, please." Now inside, Roze asks where the Grand Duke is, and the aide politely asks her to wait for a moment. The aide instructs a maid to bring tea for their guest, prompting Roze to think, "Wow." She internally remarks on how impressive he is to be a butler at such a young age, as he glances back with a slight smile. The aide informs her that the Grand Duke has been eagerly awaiting her arrival, leaving her to wonder why he was expecting her. As the aide offers her tea with a pleasant smile, Grand Duke Artem appears in the doorway behind him. The Grand Duke greets her with a warm smile, remarking that it's been a while and he thought he'd never hear from her again. Meanwhile, in a grand chamber, Duke Felice reflects on recent events, calling the outcome a shame. He laments that their plan to get rid of the Grand Duke failed, while another conspirator notes that Count Wentz has a fine wife. Two men murmur amongst themselves, with one criticizing Count Wentz for being unable to manage his own household. A man speculates the Count was with another woman, but an older nobleman silences him, demanding respect. After an apology, the older man assures his superior that it won't happen again. The subordinate reels back in pain after being disciplined, as his superior vows to have a firm word with him. The man in the dark coat clenches his fists, furious at the humiliation he suffered because of that wench. He fumes that he should have never allowed that damn Serbian woman into his house in the first place. Giving his subordinate a dark look, he issues an ultimatum: sort everything out within 1 month. Back in the Duke's residence, Roze sits on a sofa, having removed her cloak. The Grand Duke observes her, thinking to himself that, perhaps because of the wig, she resembles his pet dog, Finn. Noticing something about her hair, he reaches out to touch it, making her gasp in surprise. A memory surfaces of him affectionately petting his golden retriever, Finn. Removing the blonde wig to reveal her pink hair, Roze says it's fine while internally scoffing at the idea of resembling a dog. Composing herself, she presents him with a gift box before they continue their conversation. She explains with a smile that she had intended to give him the gift at the last banquet. Recalling the chaos of that night when she was held in his arms, she explains that things became too hectic, so she ended up keeping it. The Duke looks at the small box, surprised that she prepared a gift specifically for him. She offers to prepare something better if he isn't pleased, but he simply asks her, why? With a faint, curious smile, he begins to untie the ribbon on the gift box. He opens the box to reveal a beautiful and ornate topaz brooch. Examining the jewel, he thoughtfully notes that, while it's not a popular type of ornament, it is quite elegant. In a cute chibi form, she eagerly asks if he likes it. He pins the brooch to his vest, smiling as he asks how it looks. Stepping closer, she offers to fix it for him, gently adjusting its position. She asks him if he knows the meaning of topaz, to which he replies with a question of his own, wondering if it has one. Explaining that topaz protects life and health, she thinks about the novel's plot, where he is fated to die soon, and feels she cannot ignore it. The Grand Duke looks at her with a knowing, thoughtful expression. She states firmly that she doesn't want him to die, and that the brooch carries this sentiment. She privately worries if he'll believe her, knowing his death would divert suspicion from her. In a flashback, she reaches for him across scattered newspapers, determined to earn his trust and prevent his death. He hums in thought, a gentle smile on his face as he looks at her. He leans in closer, deducing that if she knows he's going to die, then she must also know how to prevent it, leaving her stunned. Grand Duke Artem smiles warmly, inviting her to begin her story. Tick-tock. In a flashback to that night, Roze stands by a window, anxiously awaiting the right time. Remembering her plan, she recalls telling her maid she'd be back before dinner, and pleading with the frightened girl Jane to pretend to be her while she was gone. The memory of Jane's worried face lingers. Her husband enters her chambers with medicine, commenting on her dreadful voice, causing Roze to panic internally, wondering why he's there, and fearing he'll find out she's gone. He sets the medicine aside and grabs her from behind, asking why she's surprised he came himself and suggesting they have some private time. He tightens his grip, menacingly asking if she has something she needs to say to him. Quack! He violently grabs her by the neck. He berates the disguised maid for the disgrace she's caused him, threatening to teach her a lesson as she realizes how lucky the real Roze is to be gone. Suddenly, a blonde woman enters, interrupting him to report an urgent matter. The Count looks annoyed at the timing. After the blonde woman insists the matter is serious, the Count calls his wife a disappointment and leaves, causing the terrified maid to collapse in relief. Alone and shaken, Jane prays for her lady's safe and quick return, terrified of what the Count will do if he discovers the ruse. Back in the present, Roze, dressed as a maid, tells the Grand Duke that their first step must be to shift public opinion. She points out that he's known as the Empire's butcher. Crash. Their conversation is interrupted as Finn the dog leaps up, knocking over a vase of flowers, while an unseen person shouts Ross's name. The Grand Duke swiftly catches her, holding her close as flowers rain down around them. He asks if she's hurt, but she's more stunned to realize she's floating. In the background, his red-haired aide storms in, furious at his disobedient dog, Finn. The red-haired aide apologizes profusely, holding the happy dog and explaining that he suddenly ran out. Roze mentions to the Grand Duke that she felt her body lift off the ground when he caught her, causing the red-haired aide to freeze in absolute panic. She looks down at her wet apron with a pensive expression. She looks up in surprise as the shirtless Grand Duke drapes his coat over her, telling her he doesn't want her catching a cold. While Finn playfully climbs on him, the aide scolds the Grand Duke for using magic, but the Duke retorts, asking what else he should have done. Touched by his concern, Roze clutches the coat and decides it's better to accept his kindness. Now fully dressed again, the Grand Duke asks her to explain how his reputation is connected to a death sentence. Roze explains it's based on evidence, recalling the moment she saw a document in her husband's study detailing a plan to execute the Duke using his infamy as justification. She explains that even at the last banquet, the gathered crowd seemed to be waiting for the attack, suggesting it was all part of the plot. Deciding she lacks proof, she resolves not to mention the former empress's involvement just yet. With a confident smile, she puts her hand on her heart and vows to make sure he survives. The Grand Duke reflects on her story, concluding she was hiding something, and that the more she knows, the more danger her proximity to Count Wentz puts her in. Glowing with gratitude, Roze thanks him, saying she feels she owes him her life yet again. He raises a hand to stop her, suggesting that instead, she give him a chance to repay her kindness. An awkward silence settles between them as they sit across from one another at the table. Sensing he's changing the subject, she decides not to push, and instead awkwardly brings up her request for divorce funds. Taking a sip of tea, the Grand Duke encourages her to state the amount she needs without any hesitation. Her eyes light up with hope as she asks if he really means it. He simply nods in confirmation while sipping his tea. He spits his tea everywhere when, in a cute chibi form, she enthusiastically asks for 10 billion res. With wide, earnest eyes, she clarifies that she's not asking for charity and promises she can pay every coin back. He stares at her, stunned into silence, as she seriously repeats her request. He considers the sum, thinking to himself that it's enough money to run an entire commercial district. She watches him with hopeful anticipation as he quietly contemplates her enormous request for 10 billion. She nervously admits it's a large amount, but he suddenly agrees to do it, causing her to shout in shock. She stares at him in utter disbelief, questioning if he's really going to lend her the money so easily. He agrees to lend her the money, but only on the condition that she answer one question for him. Leaning forward intently, he points a finger at her as he prepares to state his condition. In her imagination, she sees herself as a chic business owner, proudly announcing her plan to start a department store, which leaves the Duke momentarily speechless. Intrigued, he leans back with a slight smile and asks her to explain her plan in more detail. In a cute chibi fantasy, Roze acts as a teacher, explaining the concept of a department store to the Grand Duke. She clarifies that it's a place that gathers multiple shops under one roof for consumer convenience, to which the chibi Duke can only say, "Oh." Roze explains that currently, people must shop or hire help individually, but her department store will allow them to easily compete with existing markets. Revealing her business model, she declares that instead of charging rent, she will take a percentage of sales as commission. She continues, stating the store will feature upscale products sold at a 30% markup, focusing on luxury over direct quality management. The Grand Duke considers her plan, thinking to himself that higher prices and exclusivity are perfect for the show-off nobility. A symbolic handshake, adorned with fine jewelry, seals their business agreement. Winking confidently, Roze asks him if 10 billion res is a worthwhile investment. The Grand Duke smiles with satisfaction, arms crossed, having clearly made up his mind. The scene transitions to the exterior of a grand estate at nightfall. A hooded Roze peeks nervously from behind a hedge, having finally returned. She worries that her meeting took too long and hopes her maid Jane is safe, noting that the lights in the house are off. Whoosh! A hand suddenly grabs her shoulder from behind, causing her to gasp in terror. A black-haired man with red eyes silences her, and she recognizes him with a whisper. "Cern." Cern swiftly lifts her into his arms, promising to be quiet and asking her to bear with him for a moment. Tap, tap. His feet land silently on a stone path as he carries her through the grounds. Once inside, still in his arms, Roze quietly asks Cern if anything happened while she was gone. In a flashback, a frightened maid clutches her own neck, silently begging for the madam not to be told that the master tried to strangle her. Cern, in uniform, recalls the event with concern, believing that Roze absolutely needs to know what happened. He continues to think that despite everything, the madam still cares for the master. Another maid pleads with Cern, arguing that Roze is barely holding herself together and the truth about her husband's attack would break her heart. Elsewhere, the blonde woman lies in bed with Count Wentz, gently asking if he's asleep. Annoyed, she glares at his sleeping face, thinking that his handsome looks are his only redeeming quality. She presses him about the banquet, pointing out that he and Roze haven't spoken or even eaten together in days. The blonde woman cruelly suggests Roze is tired of him, enraging the Count, who grabs her and vows he won't tolerate being spoken of that way. With a triumphant smirk, she listens as the Count declares he'll divorce Roze within the month, secretly delighting in the news. A blonde maid bursts into the room, urgently calling out Roze's name. Looking up from her paperwork, Roze calmly asks the maid, "Doanna, what is it?" Doanna leans in conspiratorially, asking if something is going on between her and the Count. With a placid smile, Roze dismisses her concern, saying the Count is just sulking and that she plans to talk to him soon. Doanna smirks, privately mocking Roze for thinking everything is fine, while her husband Eric is already planning their divorce. When Doanna mentions her own husband was never like that, Roze pauses, a flicker of curiosity in her eyes. Doanna gets lost in a flustered daydream about her kind husband from her previous life, Snapping back to the present, Doana advises Roz to make the Count come to her first, a suggestion Roz quietly considers. Roz coolly replies that Doana isn't exactly in a position to lecture her on such matters. Doana feigns friendship, telling Roz she can always lean on her, but Roz continues writing, clearly burdened by the conversation. Internally, Roz scoffs at the offer, thinking that her relying on Doana is exactly what the maid wants most. At another location, a carriage arrives, and an attendant greets the passenger as Lord Cedric, former Count. The stern-faced Lord Cedric emerges with a dark aura, demanding that Roz be brought to him immediately. The scene shifts to a bright, lavishly decorated study. Cedric de Wentz, Eric's father, confronts Roz, insulting her for her insolent tone and innocent face, which he says reminds him of her mother. Playing dumb, Roz claims she has no idea why he has appeared so suddenly, feigning confusion. Cedric loses his temper, shouting that if she can't support her husband, she should at least stop being a burden. He continues his tirade, telling her he's tired of being disappointed, and that her job is to keep Eric in line and be useful to the family. He berates her for taking a side in a politically sensitive situation, accusing her of lacking the dignity to remain neutral, but she knows his words are just an excuse to scold her for siding with the Grand Duke at the banquet. Roz fantasizes about screaming back that his son is the real problem, and that she's getting a divorce, but she stifles the urge, knowing it would only complicate things. Composing herself, she bows her head and apologizes, admitting she wasn't thinking clearly. Cedric sneers, blaming her actions on her Serviette blood, as a menacing red aura surrounds Roz. Barely restraining her anger, Roz clenches her fists and thinks to herself that she should just punch him. Lord Cedric gives the red-haired man with an eye patch a piercing glare as they stand opposite each other. Cedric departs, warning the man that this was merely a warning and his next action won't be just words. Wham! Hearing the door slam, Roz wonders to herself if scolding her was the only reason he came. As they walk down the hall, Cedric asks the red-haired man if he's taken care of the assignment. The man confirms he left it in Roz's room as instructed, prompting a sinister smile from Cedric, who believes it will keep her quiet for a while. At another location, an attendant informs his master that someone is waiting for him inside the room. TSK, a red-haired man lies on a divan, thinking he needs to resolve this mess, while Jane stands nearby holding flowers. Jane peeks into the room, wondering who the visitor is, and her eyes widen in shock at what she sees. As an attendant announces his master's arrival, Jane is stunned to see Sir Cern has come to visit. A nobleman questions Cern about any unusual movements between Grand Duke Arthium and Roz, to which Cern reports there have been none. The nobleman gives Cern a suspicious, scrutinizing look. He presses further, asking if the two of them haven't met privately, which triggers Jane's memory of Doana questioning her. Panicked, Jane worries that Sir Cern will reveal Roz snuck out and debates whether she should intervene. As Jane eavesdrops anxiously, Cern firmly denies any such private meeting has occurred. In a flashback, a blonde woman details a plot to poison a cup for Princess Diana to offer the Grand Duke, which will frame him when she collapses. Cern listens, horrified, questioning if the Emperor would approve such a plan. The plan is confirmed to have the Emperor's approval, with the only condition being that the antidote works so the woman doesn't die. Back in the present, the nobleman sternly warns Cern to ensure the woman doesn't get involved with the Grand Duke. With a somber expression, Cern wishes his master safe travels. After the nobleman leaves, Cern turns to find Jane hiding behind crates and asks if she heard everything. Jane realizes why he's been helping her, and fearfully asks if he's there to silence her, but Cern remains quiet. With surprising calm, Jane says she wouldn't be afraid even if she were to die now. She tells Cern that the scariest thing is no longer being able to trust anyone. Cern calls out to Jane, but she turns her back on him, telling him never to say her name or look at her again. Clenching his fist, Cern resolves to do what's necessary for his lady's sake. The scene shifts to a few minutes prior, showing Roz's empty, slightly disheveled bedroom. The blonde maid, Doana, enters the room, muttering that she escaped to get away from the family drama. She discovers a set of luxury cosmetics with a note in the Count's handwriting, wondering if it's a gift for Roz. Doana grows suspicious, thinking the Count is having a secret affair while simultaneously planning a divorce. Annoyed, she decides to use the cosmetics herself, scoffing that Roz wouldn't appreciate them anyway. After applying some cream, she finds it doesn't seem to suit her skin. Doana looks into a mirror, but her reflection is faceless. Crash! The cream jar slips from her hand and shatters on the floor. Kia! A piercing scream erupts from behind the door, making someone wonder where it came from. Thump! Roz bursts through the doors, frantically asking what in the world happened. She stares in shock at Doana's face, now covered in hideous red blisters, exclaiming, "My God, your face, what the hell?" An advertisement for other comics is displayed. A doctor kneels to examine Doanna's face, explaining to Roz and a butler that the blisters are caused by various poisons. Doanna glares as the doctor informs her that, while the blisters will fade, he cannot guarantee there won't be scarring. Enraged, Doanna grabs the doctor, accusing him of being in cahoots with Roz, just as Count Eric rushes in, calling her name. Doanna throws herself into Eric's arms, crying and asking what she's supposed to do. Roz stands by, utterly confused by the scene. As the doctor nervously adjusts his monocle, Eric holds Doanna, confused by her mention of a gift and denying he would ever give her something like that. A dark look crosses Eric's face as he internally wonders if his father's recent visit is connected to this incident. Roz explains that since Doanna insisted, she had all the cosmetics from her room brought out for inspection. Pointing to the collection of cosmetics, Roz challenges Doanna to find the specific item she claims was a gift. Doanna scrambles over to the bed and begins frantically searching through the items. After a frantic search, she turns around in dismay, realizing the cosmetic she's looking for isn't there. She panics, shouting that the cream jar with the gemstone in the Count's note is the only one missing. Doanna points an accusatory finger at Roz, asking if she had someone throw it away, leaving Roz stunned. Doanna accuses Roz of destroying the evidence, but the butler calmly refutes her, stating the madam would never do such a thing and that no such order was ever given. Doanna internally seethes, wondering what kind of lowly maid would covet the madam's things, then recoils at being called a lowly maid herself. Sigh. Eric, pinching the bridge of his nose, declares that's enough and says he will investigate the matter himself. The butler gently escorts a weary Roz away, assuring her he'll take care of everything, and she gratefully accepts his help. Crying, Doanna wonders what horrible thing she did to deserve this, lamenting that all she did was use one cream. The butler sternly reminds Doanna that the madam's kindness doesn't give her the right to act as if she owns the place. Doanna scoffs internally, believing Roz is the one who doesn't know her place, and that she's only being merciful by not taking everything. As Doanna tries to shout a rebuttal, she is suddenly cut short, her expression frozen in shock. The butler urgently yells for Doanna to snap out of it as she appears to be in a daze. In Cedric's office, Eric reads a letter and realizes he's received the gift his father left behind. As he writes, Eric resolves to handle Roz himself, thinking there was no need for his father's extreme measures. Elsewhere, Cedric smirks contemptuously, dismissing his son as an arrogant little brat. A young man in a red uniform is ordered to find out who has the poisoned cream now. The butler asks the young man to handle the cleanup for the madam's sake, but the young man appears hesitant. The butler reflects on his 30 years serving Lord Cedric, recalling a time when his master was a sharp, admirable man. Now, seeing the vile schemes Cedric is involved in, the butler realizes his true priority must be protecting the suffering Roz. He looks at the young man, asking if he also serves the madam with a loyal heart. Looking resolved, the young man asks the butler to trust him and help him put a stop to the schemes. In another room, a doctor informs Eric that the blonde woman resting in bed will be fine after some rest. Wah! The blonde woman gleefully asks Eric if he heard the news, announcing that she's pregnant. Eric looks stunned by the news of a baby, while the woman celebrates and the doctor looks on nervously. Sob. The woman then tearfully claims that Sir Gwen tried to assault her while she was alone, and she collapsed after running away. The butler, Gwen, internally seethes at the false accusation, vowing not to let the woman get away with her lies. Eric scoffs, finding her story unbelievable, but then a sudden realization makes him pause. He takes her hands, promising to take care of Gwen and telling her to simply get some rest. She embraces him, declaring that he's the only one she can truly rely on. Gwen stands in disbelief, asking Eric what he's talking about. Stomp. Eric walks past him with cold determination. With a sinister smile, Eric decides he cannot simply let this matter go. Turning to the loyal butler, he delivers a stunning blow. You're fired. With heavy footsteps, Eric walks away from Gwen, thinking he can't let this slide, and declaring the butler is fired. A shocked Gwen stammers, asking what Eric means. Eric smirks, telling Gwen he has always admired his tight-lipped nature and his ability to feign ignorance or knowledge as needed. Eric connects Gwen's silence about the cosmetics to the assault allegation, stating he doesn't care whether Gwen actually laid a hand on Doanna or not. Stump. Eric walks off, telling Gwen the real problem is that his loyalty is to his father, not to him. He glares back, ordering Gwen to get out immediately or be dragged out. Roz worries after hearing Eric summoned Gwen, fearing the butler is in trouble for protecting her. A maid bursts into the room, urgently telling Roz that something terrible has happened. As Gwen stands alone in the pouring rain, the maid delivers the shocking news. The Count has dismissed the butler, Tipping his hat in the rain, Gwen thinks he has no regrets leaving a household that has changed so much for the worse. His only worry is for his gentle lady Roze and whether she will be able to endure without him. "Madam," Roze calls out, running into the rain without an umbrella, clearly distraught. Roze knows a dismissed servant has few options and, remembering his constant help, decides she must do something for him. Standing before him in the rain, she tells Gwen that even if he's not the head butler, she still needs him. With a bright, hopeful smile, Roze tells him about a business she has been planning. She recalls learning that Gwen and her mother's family were the ones who saved the Wen's household from ruin. Facing him, she asks if he would lend his skills to her cause once more. Seeing his surprise, Roze acknowledges that her request is sudden. She reassures him that he will always be welcome and tells him to contact her when he's ready, moving him with her sincerity. Smiling warmly, Gwen tips his hat in farewell, telling her he expects her to be a company president the next time they meet. From a window, Eric and the blonde woman watch the scene, with her remarking on the fuss being made over a simple goodbye. From a reflection, the blonde woman thinks she didn't expect him to fire Gwen so easily and feels satisfied that she chose the right man. Leaning in, the blonde woman cups Eric's face and tells him not to worry about such trifles, suggesting they finish what they were doing. She kisses him passionately, vowing to herself that she is never letting this man go. Back in her room, Roze gets dried off by a maid who says she was surprised to see her run out into the rain like that. Two other maids express their gratitude, with one tearfully thanking their lady, while the other says she feels much better now. Roze, her pink hair in a neat braid, kindly asks Jane to bring some tea to her room. Roze explains to Jane that her business plan must be kept secret for now, and Jane correctly guesses she is to pretend she knows nothing. When Jane asks if it's fine for CERN to know, Roze immediately and forcefully objects, startling both Jane and herself. Jane is flustered by the strange mood, imagining herself in a romantic scene with the young man in the red uniform. Just as Roze is about to explain something important, a knock at the door interrupts them. A maid announces that her lady's bath is ready, leaving Roze to wonder about the timing. The scene shifts to a luxurious bathtub filled with shimmering water and delicate flower petals. In a white robe, Roze approaches the tub, confused by the flowers and wondering what's going on. Roze's expression turns to one of disgust as she thinks about how he was with another woman just moments ago. A painful memory surfaces of her past life husband, Lee Do-hyun, who would make love to other women and forget her without a second thought. Tearing up, she draws a parallel between her past and present, thinking how Do-hyun was her whole world, just as Eric is now Roze's. Eric suggests they move to the bed, but Roze recoils, telling him to get away. With tears in her eyes, she orders him to get his filthy body, which was just with another woman, away from her. Eric stands over her, asking if she even considers them husband and wife. Clutching her robe, Roze angrily retorts that he shouldn't have come to her while still carrying the traces of another woman. Eric looks back in anger and shock, realizing that the other woman must have revealed their affair. Bang! He slams the door on his way out, shouting that she can do as she pleases, but will be the one crawling back in regret. Alone and dripping, Roze wipes away a tear, frustrated with herself for crying over a man who isn't even her past love, and for being unable to forget the past. Overwhelmed by the suffocating atmosphere of the house, Roze stares into the distance and resolves to break free from it all. In the servants' quarters, a senior maid reminds the blonde woman that the madam is unwell, and that she's a personal maid to both the count and countess. The blonde woman smirks, announcing that she is pregnant with the count's child. When the other maid expresses disbelief, the blonde woman laughs, insisting it's true, and that the count himself confirmed it. Crack! As she advises the maid to take her side, a hand suddenly slaps her across the face, making her cry out in pain. The blonde woman, Doanna, looks up with cold resolve, pondering what this turn of events means for her future. Later, Doanna brings tea to Roze in bed, condescendingly asking why she keeps burdening others instead of taking care of herself. Doanna tells Roze to have other servants attend to her from now on, explaining that she herself must be careful now. Taking a sip of tea, Roze calmly asks if something is going on. With a radiant smile, surrounded by a floral background, Doanna happily reveals, "I'm pregnant." Roze realizes the situation is repeating itself, just like in her past life, and mentally asks Doanna who the father is. Doanna smugly informs Roze that the father promised he would handle things with his wife. Giddy with delight, Doanna adds that he plans to make her the countess, not just his mistress. Doanna daydreams of becoming Countess Doanna, declaring that Roze will have to step aside so she can carve out her own place. Holding Roze's hands, Doanna justifies her actions by saying that a person's heart can't be stopped from straying. The two women sit on the bed together, Doanna smiling triumphantly while Roze looks on. Doanna thinks that while she hoped this marriage would be an escape, the wretched memories of her past life are fueling an anger inside her. Roze slams her cup down and asks if Doanna feels any guilt, prompting Doana to angrily demand an apology for the rumors she had to endure. Doana shouts that their marriage wasn't based on love, and that Roze has no right to be bitter when she just lucked into becoming a countess. Whack. Roze furiously slaps Doana across the face. Holding her stinging cheek, Doana stares back in disbelief, utterly stunned. Bang! A man who appears to be Eric bursts into the room, demanding to know what the commotion is about. Wah. Doana immediately runs into his arms, crying out for her lord. Prying into his chest, Doana falsely claims that the madam suddenly lashed out and struck her for no reason. Resting in bed, Roze caresses Eric's face and congratulates him, saying he'll finally be the father he always wanted to be. Eric holds Danya and sneers at Roze, calling her a vicious woman who is jealous because she lost her own child through her own carelessness. Roze snaps, screaming if he's insane, while memory shows a distraught older woman being comforted as narration condemns Eric's cruelty to Roze. Whack! Eric furiously throws a pillow, ordering both Roze and Danya to get out immediately. Looking stunned, Eric berates Roze for stepping out of line after he'd given her some slack. Holding a pillow defensively, Roze declares that if that's how it is, then they should get a divorce. As Eric comforts Danya, Roze watches with cold satisfaction, thinking she finally pushed him to demand a divorce first. Eric turns his back on Roze, telling Danya to ignore her as they leave. Surrounded by a floral background, Roze calmly agrees. Let's divorce. A confident smile spreads across her face as she decides she's tired of living with a philandering husband. Eric scoffs at her bold words, warning her not to take it back, but Roze firmly states she won't, and will leave the house right now. Thump. Alone now, Roze slams her teacup down, fuming that the more she thinks about it, the more infuriated she gets. Sipping her tea, she feels relief that Eric can't back out of the divorce, but then worries about having nowhere to go. Picturing her parents' reaction. She laments that she even tried attending banquets to make connections for this exact situation, calling her husband useless. As she sips her tea, a blonde man in an ornate blue cape quietly approaches her from behind. Startled, Roze looks up and exclaims, "D-Duke," as he asks what she was so lost in thought about that she didn't hear his greeting. With a gentle smile, Roze explains to the Duke that she has just left her husband's house. She begins to explain that she left for now, but her voice falters as she tears up. As Ross's head droops in distress, she wonders what she should do next. Crash! The teacup shatters as Roze faints, and the Duke catches her, frantically calling out her name. The Duke holds the unconscious Roze in his arms, calling out her name in alarm. He realizes her entire body is burning hot with a fever. The Duke resolves to take Roze to his estate for safety, worrying that if divorce rumors spread on top of past gossip, her reputation will be ruined. He looks down at her with a look of deep concern and resolve. He rushes toward a carriage, but a guard tries to stop him, stammering about her condition. The Duke gently hands Roze to another man, ordering him to take her to the Serviette residence at once. At the gate of a grand mansion, someone shouts that they can't just barge in. An elegant woman with pink hair is told there are strict orders to let no one in, but the visitor insists it is urgent. The pink-haired woman looks on with a serene expression, holding a single rose. She wonders about the commotion as the servant runs up, stammering that her lady must see who has arrived. She sees the Duke carrying Roze, who is bundled in his cape. The woman gasps in shock, crying out, "My heavens!" She drops her basket of flowers in horror, screaming Ross's name. Rushing to the Duke's side, she asks what happened, and he explains Roze has a high fever and needs to get inside. A stern-looking man with a beard appears, demanding to know the meaning of the commotion, and the woman calls him Damon. The man is identified as Count Serviette, Ross's father. Count Serviette sternly addresses the Duke for causing a fuss and bringing Roze to his doorstep. The Count reaches out to take his daughter from the Duke's arms. He carefully lifts Roze, then orders his staff to escort the Duke inside and immediately summon a physician. Later, Count Serviette sits anxiously by his unconscious daughter's bedside. Gently touching her forehead, he laments that she's a foolish girl for only returning after 3 years in such a state. The Duke comforts the Count, telling him not to worry, and that the physician says it's just a simple chill. Count Serviette looks up and thanks the Duke for his help. The Count then asks how this situation came about and why the Duke personally brought Roze to him. Recalling their conversation, the Duke remembers Roze telling him her divorce would soon be finalized, and he thinks he must be careful with his words. The Duke explains he found Roze alone at a salon, which prompts the Count to exclaim in shock that she was without even an attendant. With a serious expression, the Duke prepares to ask the Count a critical question. He looks Count Serviette in the eye and asks if he is prepared to stand by Roze, no matter what choice she makes. The Count recalls his daughter's misery, crying every night and avoiding society, while her husband behaved disgracefully. Reflecting on her wedding day, he concludes that if that was the path she chose for happiness, then he must support her now and is prepared to accept anything. Count Serviat tells the Duke that standing by one's child is what it means to be a parent. The Count decides they will listen to Roze's story little by little once she wakes up. In her bed, Roze's purple eyes flutter open as she regains consciousness. Her parents rush to her side, and Count Serviat cries out her name as she sits up. Confused, Roze wonders where she is, remembering she collapsed while with the Duke. Her mother tears up, noting Roze has the same hair color and a similar face to her own. Wah! The woman embraces Roze tightly, crying out and asking what in the world happened to her. Roze hugs her back, downplaying her situation as a small issue with her husband so as not to worry them. A memory surfaces of her past life parents worrying over her after she broke an engagement and locked herself away for a month, begging their precious star to tell them what was wrong. Determined not to disappoint anyone again, she tells her mother it's nothing serious enough to trouble them with. Count Serviat joins the embrace, holding his wife and daughter in a tight, comforting hug. Feeling her father's warmth, Roze is reminded of her parents from her past life and decides to finally tell them everything. Sobbing like a child in her father's arms, she listens as her parents apologize for not seeing her suffering. Outside, the Duke asks a man if his conversation went well, and the man confidently confirms it did. A flashback shows the Duke ordering the man to take Roze to the Serviat residence, despite the man's surprise that she has been estranged for 3 years. The Duke simply smiles, dismissing the man's concerns about her estrangement. In his thoughts, surrounded by roses, the Duke confidently reflects that her parents would never turn her away. Elsewhere, in an opulent room, a voice shouts in disbelief, "What? Divorce?" A man with dark hair laughs while reading divorce papers, commenting that, for once, Eric handled things quickly by filing with the temple. He wonders why his aide, Cern, failed to report something so important. An aide nervously explains there's a problem, and the man's expression darkens as he demands to know what it is. The aide reveals that a rumor is spreading among the servants that Count Eric has a child. The man crushes the papers, furious that Eric would cause such a mess right before the divorce, especially since the child isn't Ross's. The truth is revealed. The child belongs to a maid named Dawana. Slam! Enraged, the man slams his fist on the desk and shouts for the maid to be dragged before him at once. He seethes with anger that not only is someone pregnant, but it's a maid's child. Kicking his aide to the floor, he rants about how Eric ruined everything when he could have just divorced and found a proper match. As he laments that the rumor is likely everywhere, a red-haired woman named Tertia appears. Tertia calmly shushes him, telling him he's getting too worked up. She warns that his relationship with Eric is already strained, and killing the maid would destroy it beyond repair. He angrily asks if he's supposed to just watch a maid become the lady of the house, but she coolly replies, "Of course not." Tertia reveals she's already arranged for Eric to remarry the daughter of the Marquis of Dykard right after the divorce, leaving the man confused about why she chose a useless family. His eyes widen as he instantly understands her plan. Tertia laughs, calling him a genius and explaining the Dykard family is desperate enough to accept a concubine. Having settled on a plan, the man points decisively at his aide. He orders a letter be sent to the Marquis of Dykard immediately, demanding the wedding date be as soon as possible. At another estate, a voice wonders if the letter is truly from the Wens family. A red-haired woman at a desk notes that the Wens family is pushing for a wedding right after the divorce, suspecting they have their reasons. A man identified as Marquis Dykard sips his drink in disgust at their behavior, while his daughter, Belliard Dykard, insists they have no choice. A flashback shows that with the Empire in decline, their faction must forge ties with nobles under Duke Fleesh, forcing them to cater to others' whims. The Marquis slams his fist on the table, enraged at the idea of being forced to accept the Wentz scoundrel son. A knock sounds as a servant announces that she has brought the person they requested. A nervous young woman with short red hair enters, asking if she was summoned, while Belliard watches her from the doorway. Belliard stands beside her father, commenting on the striking resemblance between herself and the newcomer, saying it's odd they aren't twins. Belliard asks the young woman, Emily, if it's true she had a younger sister who went missing 5 years ago. Emily gasps, eagerly asking if Belliard knows something about her, and Belliard says she might even arrange a meeting. Overjoyed, Emily thanks her profusely, but Belliard stops her, stating there is one condition. With a sly smile, Belliard produces a small, sharp knife. As Emily screams, Belliard swiftly cuts a lock of her own long, red hair. Now with a shorter hairstyle mirroring Emily's, Belliard reassures her it's fine and asks her father if they now look identical, leaving Emily utterly bewildered. Belliard leans in close to a terrified Emily, reminding her there's a reason she freed her from prison and gave her a comfortable life. In a crimson-tinged memory, Belliard tells Emily she must perfectly impersonate Lady Belliard in exchange for being reunited with her long-lost sister. With her eyes squeezed shut, Emily makes her difficult decision. In the darkness, Emily's voice echoes her reluctant agreement to the plan. Elsewhere, a blonde woman in a mauve dress admires herself in a mirror, deciding the gown is acceptable. She carelessly tosses a yellow dress to a brown-haired maid, ordering her to burn the shabby thing. The blonde woman scoffs at the idea of wearing a cheap dress Roze ordered, vowing to have something worthy of her elegance made instead. Pointing to a pair of ornate shoes on the floor, she orders them to be thrown out as well, ignoring the maid's protest that they are wedding gifts. The maid looks down sadly, holding the dress as the blonde woman sarcastically asks if she needs everything spelled out for her. The woman cruelly insults the maid, asking if she caught Roze's stupidity by being around her. With a final, impatient command, the blonde woman orders the maid to clear everything away at once. Alone in the hall, the maid clutches her head in distress, worrying about where Roze is and lamenting her sudden departure. A man in a red uniform approaches, calling out to Jane and asking if she is all right. Startled, Jane recognizes Cern, who explains he heard a noise while passing by and says he must be going. As Jane turns away, Cern reaches out, calling her name to stop her. Jane angrily calls him a traitor, accusing him of driving her lady away just as Sir Cedric wanted. Cern silently presses a folded letter into her hand. Shocked, Jane looks at the letter as Serene explains that their lady left it for them in her room. Jane questions why Roze would leave him a letter, and Serene admits it was just words of thanks, adding he regrets not telling her something sooner. Cern looks down remorsefully, asking Jane if she realizes the depth of her betrayal against someone who trusted her completely. Jane remembers a happy day in the garden with Roze, reflecting on how sincerely her lady cared for them. She explains she hid the letter from everyone, intending to give it to him personally so it wouldn't be destroyed. With a determined gaze, Jane tells him she did it, even if it meant earning his resentment. Cern looks down, silently absorbing her words as her explanation concludes. Overwhelmed with sorrow, Jane clutches the letter and dress, crying out for her lady and wondering what she should do now. Back in her room, the blonde woman waits impatiently, wondering why the maid has been gone so long, just to throw away some clothes. As the door opens, she decides she'll give the maid a proper scolding upon her return. She jumps to her feet and yells into the doorway, demanding to know what's taking so long. Still yelling, she wonders how the maid could be so slow at such an easy job. An elegant red-haired woman in a purple gown appears, identifying the blonde woman as the maid carrying her son's child. The blonde woman flinches in shock, realizing this must be Eric's mother. Frightened, she worries that the woman has come to cast her aside. The red-haired woman drops her fan on the floor with a clatter, apologizing for startling her. She then steps behind the blonde woman, embracing her warmly. Tearing up, she explains that she came herself because her foolish son never introduced them. Holding the blonde woman's hands, she smiles kindly and asks for her understanding, to which the woman stammers in agreement, calling her mother. The scene shifts to a luxurious room as the red-haired woman offers a proper greeting. Standing beside Eric on the sofa, the blonde woman formally introduces herself as Doana. Eric looks away with a sigh, expressing his disgust at watching the two of them together. He eyes his mother and Doana suspiciously, asking what scheme she is planning this time. His mother feigns offense, claiming to be thrilled about her grandchild, but Eric retorts that she didn't act this way when Roze was pregnant. Changing the subject, the red-haired woman gently touches the bandage on Doana's face, asking how she was injured. Doana hesitates before blaming Roze for her injury. In a dramatic flashback, Doana falsely claims Roze attacked her out of jealousy, causing the red-haired woman to react with shock. The woman's expression hardens as she thinks about Roze and Eric. Watching Doana lean against her son, she internally seethes, convinced the sly vixen Roze has her claws in him. An older man with black hair comments that Roze was always strange, suggesting she takes after her mother. He continues his critique, stating that Ross's mother was only good at beguiling men. The man tells Doana and Eric to ignore everything else and focus on their wedding. He then stands and declares the wedding will proceed within the next few days, leaving Eric utterly stunned. The red-haired woman insists on proceeding with the wedding quickly, wanting to get the bride fitted before her belly grows too round. Overjoyed, Doana calls the woman mother, who reveals she's already brought a designer for measurements. Eric rubs his head in frustration, thinking his family acted too rashly by showing up right after the divorce as his mother bids him farewell. As they leave, the red-haired woman waves goodbye, saying she'll see Eric again at the wedding. Thud! The doors close, leaving Doana to exclaim in delight. Doana clasps her hands together happily, thinking to herself that Eric's mother has clearly taken a liking to her. She clings to an annoyed Eric's arm, boasting that she has now captured his mother's heart as well as his. Eric dismisses her excitement about the wedding, stating they aren't as big a deal as people make them out to be. Insulted, Joanna gestures to his wedding portrait with Roze, asking if they shouldn't take it down right away. Eric grabs her hand, telling her there's no need to rush and that he will handle the portraits himself. Joanna angrily pulls her hand away, demanding to know why he has such a lukewarm attitude about removing the portraits. An aide interrupts them, and Eric turns to see who has arrived. A woman in a purple jacket introduces herself as Mona, the chief designer of Moni Blanc, presenting a white gown. Joanna acknowledges that the designer was sent by Lady Terja to prepare their wedding outfits. After inspecting the dress, Joanna criticizes it as, quote, awfully plain, prompting a shocked protest from the designer. Joanna haughtily declares that as the star of the ceremony, her dress must be more dazzling than anyone else's. When the designer cautions that too much is never a good thing, Joanna silently fumes, angry that a lowly maid would dare lecture her. She smiles menacingly, ordering the designer to make her the most splendid, glittering gown imaginable. With a cruel smirk, she adds that the dress must be incomparable to the one his ex-wife wore. A few days later at the Serviat estate, a voice from off-screen asks what has been brought back. Ross descends the stairs, wondering aloud what is happening so early in the morning. She sees two people on the landing, one of whom holds a letter and explains she had to accept it because everyone was acting so awkward. The woman decides not to tell Ross about the letter, but Ross has already seen them. The woman holding the letter recognizes the crest, realizing with shock that it must be Eric's wedding invitation. Roz calmly continues down the stairs, stating that she's fine and already knew Eric was remarrying, surprising the others. She holds out her hand for the invitation, asking to see it for a moment. Looking at the invitation, Roz remarks that the timing is sooner than she thought, guessing they're rushing due to Joanna's pregnancy. Her eyes widen in shock as she reads the invitation more closely. She realizes with stunned confusion that the bride's name on the invitation isn't Joanna. In a library elsewhere, a voice asks if the wedding preparations are proceeding smoothly. Tertia fans herself, boasting that she's taken care of everything so that all the children have to do is walk into the hall. Just as she reflects on the impending marriage, an aide bursts in, shouting that a disaster has struck for Lord Cedric. Cedric, the man with the eye patch, demands to know what the aide means, who reports that Sir Cern was asking about Lord Gwen's successor. Confused, Cedric repeats the word successor, asking what nonsense the aide is talking about. The aide nervously explains that Lord Gwen has left the household because Count Eric personally expelled him. The older man furiously throws down his cane, enraged that Eric would dare cast out the loyal Gwen. He orders Eric to be brought before him at once, while in another room, Eric wonders why he's being bothered during wedding preparations. Eric's father confronts him, screaming that in the 3 years since becoming Count, Eric has not once satisfied him. Tiesk, Eric sighs in frustration, thinking there's a limit to his father's foolishness. His father demands to know why Eric threw Gwen out, accusingly asking if he even knows who has been cleaning up his messes. Eric insists he had a good reason for the dismissal, but his father angrily dismisses it as something petty. In a flashback, the father lectures a younger Eric about Gwen's 30 years of devotion, advising him to listen to wiser men if he's a fool. While his father declares that nothing will go Eric's way, Eric retorts that he will marry the one he chooses, unlike his father. Enraged, his father scoffs at the idea of a low-born woman from the gutter, while Eric thinks that her status won't matter when she's the countess. The father crushes a letter, furiously shouting that he never accepted that wench as his daughter-in-law. He shoves the letter at Eric, commanding him to marry the Marquess of Descartes' youngest daughter, leaving Eric completely stunned. Eric angrily tells his father to stop, asserting his authority as the Count to make his own decisions. His father laughs mockingly, saying he's putting a stop to Eric's stupid doll-playing nonsense. With a final roar of fury, the father strikes Eric, screaming that his defiance will be his end. Lying bleeding on the floor, Eric reflects on his father's hypocrisy, thinking he's sick of putting up with his nonsense. In a terrifying memory, a woman begs to be let go as Eric, his head bloodied, pleads not to be sent back to the basement for re-education. A distraught man recalls his terror of that horrible place. With a bleeding gash on his forehead, Eric glares defiantly, screaming that he can't go back in there. A woman with red hair asks a bruised, red-haired woman named Emily, who is cowering on the floor, if she intends to keep acting this way. The woman lifts Emily's chin, reminding her the wedding is in 2 days, and questioning how she can maintain her act. Crushing a doll, the woman violently grabs Emily's face, threatening that both she and her younger brother will disappear if she fails to fool the right people. She smiles cruelly, ordering Emily to forget her past and become the perfect Belriar. Remembering her happy younger brother, a determined Emily agrees, promising she will never be found out for his sake. Pleased, The woman praises her spirit, saying she's finally starting to please her. Holding her hands gently, the woman encourages Emily to try again, reminding her that she is the star of the wedding. The scene shifts to the magnificent residence of Grand Duke Artyom as a voice notes the wedding is the day after tomorrow. Roz sits on a couch, clarifying that she isn't asking for the wedding to be stopped. A blonde man sitting opposite her looks up thoughtfully, questioning if it's thanks to her. Roz explains she came seeking information, prompting him to ponder the name Belriar. The man reveals the bride is the Marquis of Descartes' beloved, reclusive youngest daughter. He then admits he knows nothing more, leaving Roz stunned. A montage reveals that the Marquis keeps his daughter hidden from the public, so Roz realizes she's never had a proper conversation with her either. With her arms crossed, Roz decides something feels off and resolves to investigate in person. The blonde man leans in with an intrigued smile. He asks what she means by her visit, assuming she had another request for him. The man states that while they've exchanged terms by letter, he will provide the specifics upon his return. Roz strikes a confident pose, assuring her investor, the Grand Duke, that she won't disappoint him. Leaving his estate, she feels drained, thinking their brief talk went on for a strangely long time. She reflects on how Gwen's help resolved many troublesome issues as an aide presents her with a massive stack of documents. Realizing the time, she hurries off, determined to get back before it's too late. Rushing along, she collides with a dark-haired man and cries out in shock, recognizing Cern. Cerny greets her warmly, surprised by the encounter, and asks if she is hurt. She smiles brightly, reassuring him that she is fine thanks to his quick catch. Relieved, Cern offers to escort her home as an apology for the collision. As they walk toward a mansion at sunset, he admits he didn't expect her to be so happy to see him. Roz insists she is, but Cern soberly points out she left with only a letter behind. Looking away sheepishly, she apologizes and explains that grim circumstances forced her to leave in a hurry. She asks about Jane, expressing her worry that he and the maid have grown distant, causing Serene to flinch. He looks away, realizing with dismay that Jane has not yet told Ross he is one of Cedric's subordinates. As they continue walking, he silently admits to himself that he has wronged Jane. Roz explains that Jane isn't ready to see her yet, so she's simply waiting for her to come around. She gives Serene a friendly pat on the shoulder. Touched, Serene thinks to himself how kind his madam truly is. Roz mentions she hoped to see Jane at Eric's wedding, shocking Serene with the revelation that she already knew. She correctly guesses he kept it secret out of concern for her feelings, but waves it off, insisting she doesn't care about Eric's remarriage. In a dark flashback, a terrorized Eric remembers a bloody room, thinking that to him, that place was hell. In a quiet library, a soothing voice tells Eric that it's all right. Eric's mother, Tertia, comforts him, saying he knows how his father fusses over everything. Eric rests his head in her lap as she reflects that while Cedric may have acted out of affection, he went too far. She apologizes for his bandaged hand, but he insists it was his own fault for getting startled and stepping in. Tertia gently cups his face, encouraging him not to let his father's actions get him down. She reassures him that no matter what happens, he is the proud son of Count Wentz. With a confident smile, Tertia promises to handle his father and tells Eric to focus only on the upcoming wedding, declaring that is all that matters to her. In a lavish room, a voice from off-screen announces a solution to the seating arrangement. Ross internally fumes, recalling Gwen and Doanna's cruelty and wishing she could march into the wedding to mock Doanna. She admits to herself that despite trying to forget, she can't let go of her regrets, as the blonde man watches her with concern. He notices her lack of focus and asks if she's all right, but she quickly dismisses his concern. Taking her hand, he correctly guesses that her ex-husband's wedding is bothering her, which she confirms. She confesses it's not love for Eric, but a shameful desire to see Doanna's misfortune to ease her own bitterness. The blonde man grabs her arm, startling her as he insists that she absolutely must go to the wedding. Roz stares at him, completely taken aback by his sudden, forceful declaration. He tells her they'd better hurry if they're going to make a stop on the way, leaving her to ask, "What?" At a magnificent boutique, a woman with brown hair bows and welcomes Your Grace. Awed by the opulent shop, Ross whispers that she can't believe such a place exists. The blonde man leans close to Ross, causing her to blush and pull back slightly. An assistant asks if they should prepare his companion, but Roz interrupts, asking if she can be ready in 30 minutes. The assistant smiles apologetically, explaining that with hair and makeup, it's impossible. They'll need at least 2 hours. Roz realizes with a sigh that the timeline is far too tight. Boom! A flash of energy explodes behind the two stunned assistants. As the blonde man steps forward, the lead assistant composes herself and asks them to follow her this way. Roz worries aloud about rumors spreading, but the Grand Duke calmly states he's already used to people whispering about him. He places a hand on her arm, gently telling her that she is the one he's worried for. Roze looks down, touched by his sincere concern for her. Tap, tap, a pair of heels approach as a voice asks, "My lady?" 3 determined stylists appear, announcing they understand the situation and will prepare her perfectly. An assistant whisks a surprised Roze away as the Grand Duke waves, promising to see her shortly. The scene shifts to a dozen years ago at the Serviat estate. A younger, serious-looking blonde boy walks ahead of a young Roze. He tells the young Roze to stop following him, but she immediately asks why not. The boy warns her that staying close to him will only lead to scandalous rumors about her. Declaring that she doesn't mind, young Roze places a flower crown on his head. She sweetly explains that rumors don't matter because, more than anything, she just doesn't want him to be lonely. Back in the present, the Grand Duke stands dressed in his formal attire. Kia, the boutique assistant, clasps her cheeks, squealing with delight. She gushes that he looks absolutely perfect, and he graciously thanks her for the hard work. The assistant pulls back a red curtain, announcing that the lady is ready as well. As the Grand Duke reaches for the curtain, the assistant asks if he would like to see her. He looks on with a captivated smile as Roze is revealed in a stunning white gown, thinking, seriously. At the wedding venue, guests arrive by carriage to the grand estate. 2 noblewomen gossip that the scale of this wedding far surpasses that of the first wife's. One of the women gasps, pointing toward the entrance in shock. The guests murmur as Grand Duke Ardia makes his entrance, noting with surprise that he hasn't come alone. Accompanied by the Grand Duke, Roze makes a stunning entrance, prompting a guest to shout her name in disbelief. The crowd buzzes, questioning why the divorced Roze is at the wedding with the Grand Duke, who is on bad terms with House Wens. In her bridal suite, Doana reacts to the shocking news that Roze's arrival is about to send ripples through society. Tacky pearls scatter across the ground as a disdainful voice from above criticizes the poorly staged wedding display. Doana stands in her white gown, seething with frustration at the woman who promised her everything, yet humiliated her. A sudden noise startles Doana, causing her to whirl around and demand to know who has intruded on her. Tap tap sounding, the blonde-haired Duke and Roze arrive with a formal invitation, while Doana questions their presence. Doana mocks Roze for bringing a knight and questions how a divorcee like her secured an invitation to this event. Roze offers a cold, knowing smile, asking Doana if she returned to try and rekindle long-buried feelings for Eric. Holding an envelope sealed with red wax, Roze makes it clear she is here for a much different purpose. Doana snatches the letter, her confusion growing as she realizes it is a real wedding invitation she never expected. A sudden, terrible realization strikes Doana, her face twisting into a mask of pure, unadulterated shock and horror. Swish! Doana throws the invitation aside, screaming at Roze and her companion for playing such a cruel, heartless prank. The discarded paper reveals Eric de Wens is marrying Belliart Dykart, exposing Doana's crumbling, fraudulent plans to everyone present. Roze dismisses the outrage with a shrug, suggesting Doana go see the real bride waiting in the next room. Stunned into total silence, Doana stands paralyzed in the center of the grand, empty waiting room as reality sinks in. Broken pearls and a shabby dress lie discarded on the floor, symbolic of Doana's hollow and failed marriage ambitions. Narrator text highlights the oddity of Doana having only one attendant despite her supposedly high-status royal wedding ceremony. Doana confronts the red-haired bride and her groom, who are bewildered by the sudden, noisy intrusion into their space. Trembling with suppressed rage, Doana listens as the red-haired bride dismisses her as a mere temporary acquaintance of the Count. Doana collapses in despair, while the red-haired bride coldly informs her she will struggle as House Went's newest mistress. Clack, clack echoes through the empty hall, underscoring the grim reality and isolation of Doana's humiliating new position. An oppressive fog of disbelief rolls in as Doana desperately insists to herself that the bride switch is a lie. Terror fills Doana's eyes as she clings to the hope that Eric is unaware the bride was actually switched. Looking down from a height, the red-haired woman mocks the supposedly grand love that Doana foolishly believed was real. Roze warns Doana that Eric is a man capable of abandonment before Eric himself arrives to silence Doana's desperate screams. Eric leans in close to Roze, whispering that her current, elegant appearance is exactly the way he likes it. Eric runs his hand through Roz's hair, cruelly noting they might still be married if she had dressed like this,
A shifting atmosphere of tension arises as the question of whether Eric has truly moved on is thrown into doubt.
The blonde-haired Duke steps in, confronting Eric about the obvious disgust and inappropriate glances he is displaying toward Roze. Eric offers a smug, dismissive grin, claiming he has every right to greet the woman who was once his wife. The blonde-haired Duke remains stern, stating that unwanted attention from a former husband is nothing more than a deep insult. With a protective stance, the blonde-haired Duke declares that Roze is not a doll meant for Eric's amusement or entertainment.
Dawana begs Eric to listen, accusing Roze of lying about the bride switch and daring to insult her social standing.
Eric turns back toward Dawana with a chilling smile, asserting that his choice of bride has never changed since then. Heartbroken and betrayed, Dawana cries out, unable to comprehend how Eric could discard their history and relationship so easily. Clutching Eric's arm, Dawana tries to use their child as leverage to force him to stay in the failing marriage.
Eric remains completely unmoved, coldly calculating how the child can still serve as an heir to the Count's house.
Thwack! Eric violently shakes off Dawana's desperate grip, telling her to get a hold of herself and stop the scene. Eric looms over Dawana, reminding her she was never marriage material and denying he ever intended to abandon his duties. The blonde-haired Duke and Roze watch as Eric finalizes his rejection, leaving Dawana completely shattered on the palace floor. The blonde-haired Duke stares ahead, privately plotting to remove Dawana quickly so he can finally speak with Roze alone. Eric clears his throat awkwardly, his confidence wavering as he tries to find a way to approach Roze once again. Eric gestures for Roze to move to a private location, hoping to discuss important matters away from Dawana's sobbing presence. Roze scowls with deep irritation, recalling their past and clearly wanting nothing to do with Eric's request for private talk. Turning her back on both Eric and Dawana, Roze declares she would rather never face either of them ever again. Dawana lunges forward to stop Eric and Roze from leaving, her voice cracking as she demands to know their destination. Dawana insists she is not finished talking and screams that she will never let go of Eric's hand. Clack, clack sounding. The hallway falls silent as Roze walks away, ignoring Eric's desperate cries calling out her name. As they walk away together, the blonde-haired Duke asks Roze if she is truly comfortable leaving the situation as it is. Roze sighs in exhaustion, dismissing forced apologies as meaningless while asking the blonde-haired Duke if he is feeling all right. The blonde-haired Duke laughs off the insults, finding it a novel and amusing experience to be called something so lowly. Despite her victory over her past, Roze looks pensive and unsure, wondering why the expected satisfaction feels so strangely hollow. Roze observes the predictable behavior of Eric and the blonde Dawana, noting their frustratingly consistent nature. Amidst a shower of petals, the priest declares that Count Eric de Wentz takes Belliart as his bride. Standing at the altar, the red-haired Belliart remains silent and stoic beside her new, equally expressionless husband. Belliart turns her gaze toward Eric, softly calling out his name as the gravity of their union settles. Marquise Dykert watches with a grim scowl while the crowd gossips about Eric's messy history and his ex-wife. Eric's parents demand an immediate explanation for his behavior as the public whispers grow louder and more intrusive. Clenching his fist, Eric stares ahead in silent confusion, unable to understand the rapid shift in his circumstances. Eric recalls the startling sight of Roze walking away with the blonde-haired Duke, bewildered by her sudden transformation. A sharp snap echoes as Eric tightly grips Belliart's arm, his internal turmoil manifesting in a sudden, forceful gesture. Looking toward Eric, Belliart emphasizes that their marriage is a matter of extreme importance that must be upheld. The couple stands side by side with cold, distant expressions, their wedding day marked by duty rather than genuine affection. Eric finally completes his vows with a solemn swear, sealing the marriage contract under the watchful eyes of many. A loud bustle sounding from the palace gates signals the end of the ceremony as the new couple prepares to depart.
Beelart stands tall among the scurrying maids, her red hair vibrant against the grand architecture of the palace exterior. Releasing a weary sigh, Belliart finds solace in the fact that the wedding is finally over, despite the mess. A quick click sounding, Belliart enters her carriage, noting that Eric's household seems completely oblivious to her true intentions. Belliart's plans are suddenly interrupted as she finds Doana intimately embracing Eric in the privacy of the room. Doana smugly announces her intention to join the honeymoon, mockingly asking her new sister, Beelart, to be kind. Elsewhere, Roz enjoys a quiet moment with tea while listening to rumors about traveling benefits for expectant mothers. Jane is nearly startled out of her seat when Roz casually refers to their relationship as being like sisters. Jane recounts the scandalous news that Eric and his two women traveled south together in the very same carriage. Roz drinks her tea while reflecting on the utter shamelessness displayed by Lee Geru during the recent public events. Jane releases a heavy sigh, describing the incredibly tense atmosphere at the estate as Doana struggles to navigate politics. Ross offers Jane a way out of the chaos, inviting her to quit and come work for her instead. Jane fidgets with her hands, clearly tempted by the offer, but feeling weighed down by her current difficult situation. Seeing Jane's hesitation, Roz offers a warm, encouraging smile to reassure her friend that better opportunities are ahead. A soft thud sounding, Roz places her hand on the table to emphasize that her offer is entirely sincere. Startled by the sudden movement, Jane looks up as Roz stands, her expression filled with renewed determination and energy. Roz excitedly reveals her ambitious plan to revolutionize the market by starting a brand new business called a department store. Duke Artyom suddenly covers Rose's mouth, cautioning her against discussing such confidential and valuable business matters so carelessly. Artyom questions the wisdom of sharing secrets with anyone, while Roz insists that Jane is a trusted confidant. While Artyom scolds Roz for being too trusting, a flustered Jane tries to calm both of them down. Jane asks to hear the general idea, causing the Duke and Roz to stop their bickering and turn toward her. Roz and Duke Artyom look at Jane expectantly, waiting to see if she is truly ready to join them. Thinking deeply, Jane considers the proposal, though she worries she may only be capable of handling very simple tasks. Jane envisions a high-class department store catering to wealthy noblewomen, though she remains skeptical of her own contributions. Roz crosses her arms in frustration, realizing she lacks enough reliable allies to help her manage such a massive project. Jane wonders if Roz is truly in touch with younger tastes as the two share a moment of doubt. A sharp clap sounding, Duke Artyom strikes his palms together as a brilliant new idea suddenly comes to mind. With a confident grin, Duke Artyom offers to introduce Roz to Her Highness to help secure her business's success. Roz and Jane react with pure shock and excitement at the prospect of gaining such a powerful royal endorsement. Narrative text explains that Princess Diana is the kingdom's ultimate trendsetter, making her support the key to any business. Overwhelmed with joy, Roz lunges toward Duke Artyom and praises his genius for thinking of such a perfect alliance. Duke Artyom smiles warmly, promising to use his status as an investor to ensure the princess aids their cause. Roz beams with pure happiness, declaring that merely meeting the famous princess would be an incredible and high honor. Jane watches them with relief, though a nagging sense of unease begins to creep into the back of her mind. A sharp gasp sounding, Jane suddenly realizes that the upcoming event is the exact same one Cedric mentioned. Dark silhouettes reveal a treacherous plot involving a switched cup and a plan to poison the princess during her toast. Jane is gripped by horror as she realizes the Duke will be arrested immediately if the princess collapses from poison. Trembling with urgency, Jane rushes toward Roz, desperately asking for a private moment to reveal the life-threatening secret. Roz encourages Jane to speak her mind freely, creating a safe space for her trusted friend to share. Jane grips Roz's arm with trembling hands, emphasizing that the matter she must discuss is of extreme importance. Roz stares in stunned silence, her eyes widening as the weight of Jane's urgent warning settles in. As a request for privacy echoes through the room, The scene shifts toward the palace's quiet, sun-drenched hallway. Roz is overcome with visible horror at the thought of a deadly plot targeting the princess and the duke. Gripped by sudden realization, Roz struggles to process the magnitude of the danger threatening her closest allies. Roz frantically grips Jane's shoulders, demanding to know who else knows about the life-threatening secret. Jane reassures her lady that she overheard the conversation alone and is not currently in any physical danger. Jane urges Roz to distance herself from the Duke, fearing that continued involvement will lead to catastrophe. The scene shifts to a somber, kneeling figure at a grave, weighed down by memories and unspoken guilt.
A flashback reveals the Tear of Luna gem, recalling the complex events of the auction that bound them together.
Roz reflects on her ambition to be remembered as a capable businesswoman rather than a woman defined by divorce. Surrounded by light and roses, Roz stands with newfound determination, ready to forge her own independent path. Jane vows to prepare even more thoroughly for the princess's banquet to ensure their plans succeed without error. Tick-tock sounding. Jane realizes it is time to close the shop as the evening shadows begin to lengthen. Before they part, Jane begs Roz for a promise to ensure their mutual safety during the coming storm. Roz listens as Jane pledges her unwavering loyalty, promising to stand by her lady regardless of the outcome. Jane offers a warm, tearful smile, asking Roz to return safely and promising to be waiting for her. Walking alone at night, Jane reflects on how Roz's kindness always leads her to worry about others first. A dark figure suddenly looms behind Jane in the silent alleyway, signaling an imminent and dangerous encounter. A hand roughly covers Jane's mouth, silencing her scream as she is pulled into the cold shadows. Jane's hat falls to the ground as a desperate, silent plea for her safety remains unanswered in the night. Cern, the black-haired man, holds Jane tightly, whispering for her to stay quiet while enemies lurk nearby. Breaking free with a sudden movement, Jane turns to confront Sorn with a look of intense shock and betrayal. Jane demands to know if Cern has lost his mind, her voice cracking as she questions his sudden appearance. Jane scolds him for being careless, but Cerny's expression remains pained as he tries to explain himself. Jane calls Cern a coward, her sharp words causing him to look down in visible shame and regret. Jane accuses Cern of avoiding responsibility by working from the shadows while deceiving those he claims to love. A single tear tracks down Cerny's face as he listens to Jane's assessment of his failed character. Cern finally admits that Jane is right, acknowledging the cowardice that has governed his actions for years. Cern recalls his time following Lord Cedric's orders, realizing the deep betrayal he inflicted on his loved ones. Looking down at Jane's feet, Cerny struggles to find the words to explain the fear that drove him. Cern confesses that his actions were born from a terrifying fear of being abandoned by his only family. A flashback reveals a young Cern 10 years ago, desperately calling out for his mother in the night. The young boy runs home with a bouquet of wildflowers, his heart filled with innocent joy and excitement. Entering their humble home, the boy presents the flowers to his sickly mother, hoping to cheer her up. Despite their poverty, the boy and his mother found happiness in their simple life together as a family. The happiness ends as the mother coughs up blood, signaling her death and the boy's sudden, total isolation. Kneeling in the pouring rain, young Cern mourns at her grave, feeling as though the heavens have abandoned him. A dark-clothed man approaches the mourning boy, his presence signaling a sudden and dramatic shift in Cerny's fate. The man in the tall top hat asks if the boy is Rebecca's child while holding a letter. Looking down at the tearful boy, the man notes the striking resemblance Cern bears to his late mother. In his moment of absolute despair, Cerny saw the cold, mysterious man as his final lifeline for survival. As the man prepares to leave, young Serene fears being left alone in the cold cemetery once again. Clinging desperately to the man's cane, the boy begs to be taken away, promising to do anything. Cerny's eyes are wide with terror as he realizes that being forgotten is a fate worse than death. Despite a companion's protests, the man in the top hat agrees to bring the desperate boy with him. Back in the present, Jane reacts with horror to Serna's tragic history and the circumstances of his upbringing.
Cern takes Jane's hands, expressing his sincere desire to finally be honest with the one who was kindest.
Looking at Jane with newfound resolve, Cerny vows to protect her, even if it means confronting his dark past.
Jane looks at Cern with a soft, tearful smile, acknowledging him as Lord Cern.
Suggesting they head home, Jane tells Cerny they have much to discuss as the night deepens.
High above, Nanny watches a couple walk, noting how they seem to be ignoring their duties. Nanny scolds Dawana, claiming the mansion's discipline has weakened because the servants are fooling around.
Dawana offers a gentle smile, suggesting the servants simply need a little room to breathe sometimes.
Dawana's eyes widen in surprise as Nanny calls out to her with a firm and serious tone. Nanny asserts that the servants would never behave this way if they truly respected Dawana's authority. Recalling the wedding, Nanny asks if the Count has ever truly sought Dawana out since they married.
Memories of Li Gyeru interrupting their moments haunt Dawana as she expresses her feeling of helplessness.
Nanny explains that servants are always the first to realize the true hierarchy within a noble household. Nanny warns that the Count's lack of love reflects poorly on the Marquis and the family's honor.
Pwa-at sounding. Dawana insists she is trying her best to fulfill her role as the lady.
Nanny notes that Jane continues to interfere, hindering Dawana's efforts to establish a proper household hierarchy. Nanny suggests asserting Dawana's status or seeking the Marquise's help to handle the situation cleanly.
Dawana desperately vows to do her best, insisting there is no need for anyone to be killed.
Tuck sounding. Nanny backs down for now, placing a hand on Dawana's shoulder to offer final instructions.
Nanny warns Dawana to harden her heart if she ever wishes to see her younger sister again.
Dawana trembles in fear as Nanny looms over her, emphasizing the need for a flawless social position.
A sasrak sounding a voice calls out for the Count across a bright and sunny garden scene.
Li Gyeru looks around the trees, certain she heard the Count was somewhere nearby in the garden.
Li Gyeru discovers Eric having tea with Dawana, her cheerful greeting hiding the tension between them.
Dawana sips tea while Li Gyeru chatteringly expresses her desire to go on another southern trip.
Li Gyeru mockingly warns Dawana about the risk of miscarriage if she overexerts herself during the day.
Jabak sounding. The sound of a step heightens the tension as Dawana realizes the blonde woman's malice.
Confronting the mistress, Dawana directly accuses Li Gyeru of wishing for her to miscarry her child.
Dawana stands her ground, asserting that her child is a member of the Count's family regardless.
With cold mercy, Dawana explains she only overlooked Li Gyeru's disrespect because of her low background. Dawana harshly critiques Li Gyeru's behavior, hoping she would eventually learn some sense of decency.
Boodle, Li Gyeru trembles with rage, insisting the position of Countess was rightfully hers.
Eric sighs deeply, finding the constant arguing between the two women to be utterly tiresome. Reflecting on his desire for a peaceful life, Eric finds their repetitive bickering to be exhausting. A flashback reveals a younger, pink-haired Roze calling out to Eric with a bright, happy smile.
Back in the present, Li Gyeru demands Eric make things clear as he remains seated.
Duraruk.
Eric abruptly pushes his chair back, silencing the blonde woman with a sharp command.
Eric walks away, telling Li Gyeru she should be careful while Dawana watches him leave.
Walking toward the mansion, Eric ignores Li Gyrus shouting as she questions his sudden abandonment.
Quick sounding, Li Gyeru turns toward Dawana with a face twisted by bitter and uncontrollable resentment.
Twa sounding, Li Gyeru pours tea over Dawana's head, threatening her and her unborn child's life.
Tuck
Sounding, tea drips from a shocked Dawana as Li Gyeru warns her to remember this moment.
Jenggurang sounding, the teacup shatters on the grass as a final, ominous warning to Dawana.
Crick sounding, Eric opens a heavy door, stepping into a dark room to be alone.
Pusak, Eric collapses beside his wedding portrait, lamenting the chaos that followed his marriage.
Staring into the dark, Eric wonders if his life's ruin began even before the wedding day.
A blurry, bright memory reveals the joyous and beautiful smile Roz once shared with him.
In the memory, Roz points out a famous 500-year-old tree during their southern trip.
Sounding. A younger Eric sighs contentedly, watching Roz with a look of genuine peace.
Jill. Roz startles Eric by turning back to enthusiastically confirm her happiness to be with him.
Quack. Sounding. Roz beams with pure joy, expressing that simply being together makes her happy.
Quick. Sounding.
Eric looks at Roz, feeling a mixture of wonder and confusion at her heartfelt words. Firmly grasping her hand, Roze urges Eric to come with her as they explore together. Eric reminisces about Roz's unconditional love, remembering how her gaze used to follow him with pure devotion. Under a blooming cherry tree, Roze gently reminds Eric of the sacred, eternal vows they shared on their wedding.
Deep in thought, Roz privately pledges to remain committed to their shared journey, no matter what challenges arise.
Standing together amidst fallen petals, Roz reaffirms her intent to always remain faithfully by Eric's side. Eric flinches as painful memories of his father's coldness and the fear of abandonment haunt his current thoughts. Fearful of being discarded, Eric cynically suggests that Roz will eventually seek a divorce once his utility fades. Eric looks back at Roz and firmly denies his cynical thoughts, momentarily rejecting the fear of her leaving.
Roz offers a bright smile among the peonies, urging them to cherish their current happiness instead of worrying.
Back in the present, Eric sighs heavily, haunted by the memory of Rose's promise never to leave him. Sitting before their wedding portrait, Eric questions why he is sulking while his pride refuses to let Roz go. A quick tap sounding, Eric dismisses his doubts, possessively asserting that Roz has always belonged to him alone.
Eric orders his carriage prepared,
Convinced that Roz is merely sulking and couldn't possibly truly abandon him. Eric's servant asks about his destination as Eric confidently assumes Roz's deep love will bring her back. Preparing to depart for the Serviat estate, Eric vows to reclaim Roz, determined to end their separation immediately. The narrative shifts through a series of dramatic interludes, reflecting the complex and tangled lives of those involved. Suck duck sounding. A sharp pair of scissors cuts a rose as a sudden, shocked exclamation rings out nearby.
Startled in her garden, Roz holds her pruning shears and demands to know who has arrived so unexpectedly.
Tock, 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 sounding. Quick footsteps approach as Roz insists she had explicitly forbidden any visitors today. Quang! Sounding, the door bursts open as Roz discovers Eric already seated comfortably inside her private sanctuary.
Eric sighs with annoyance while Roz fumes, wondering how her ex-husband dares to intrude upon her new life.
Standing tall, Roz scolds Eric for his lack of notice, but he dismissively shrugs off her obvious displeasure. Roz's face contorts with anger as she struggles to comprehend Eric's audacity and his casual, insulting remarks. Relaxing on the sofa, Eric shamelessly suggests they head to bed together, further inciting Roz's growing fury. Roz recoils in disgust, flatly rejecting Eric's inappropriate suggestion while her temper begins to reach its limit. Eric grows frustrated, accusing Roz of playing hard to get and urging her to seize this rare opportunity. Roz stares at him in stunned silence as Eric asks if this wasn't the exact life she wanted. Eric inwardly questions if Roz's anger is just a performance to gain his attention, certain he is right.
Eric looks up in surprise as a frustrated Roz stands over him, her patience finally reaching its breaking point.
Sick sounding, Eric smirks with arrogance, convinced that he still holds absolute power over Roz's emotions and heart. Eric notices Roz's visible distress, mistakenly believing her trembling is due to excitement over his presence and touch. Exploding with rage, Roz calls Eric despicable and questions what he expects to gain after his recent remarriage. Ike sounding, Eric gasps in shock and clutches his face, reeling from Roz's sharp words and stinging rejection. Eric stands to confront her, shouting about his efforts to bring her back while Roz remains utterly unfazed. Bullsook sounding, Eric abruptly raises 3 fingers, catching Roz off guard with his sudden change in tactics. Eric offers a cold deal, return in 3 years to be countess, and adopt Doana's child as her own. Eric cruelly notes that their past miscarriage made everything more troublesome, revealing his utter lack of empathy.
Roz clenches her fist in silent fury, realizing that Eric has completely lost his mind with his insulting proposal. Eric laughs at his own perceived magnanimity until a sudden, loud bang echoes through the room, shattering the air. Hoodoo duck sounding, debris falls as Eric stares in terror at a bullet hole, demanding to know who fired.
Jobok. A man's steady footsteps approach as he calmly claims responsibility for the shot fired at Eric.
The Marquis enters with his rifle, declaring he can no longer tolerate Eric's insults toward his daughter's dignity.
With a face twisted in rage, the Marquis orders the scoundrel to leave his house immediately before things escalate.
Eric flees the room in a panic, shouting that everyone has lost their minds as the door slams shut.
Joe Buck sounding. Eric stomps away in a fury, resentful that the father-daughter pair dared to kick him out.
Chelpak sounding.
Eric's cloak hits the floor as he vents his frustration over the humiliating encounter at the estate. Eric barks orders at a terrified maid, demanding that Beliart be ready for his visit later that night.
With a dark and vengeful expression, Eric vows to make Ross pay for the humiliation he just endured.
Eric's thoughts turn malicious, promising to make Roze crawl back to him once she is consumed by jealousy.
The servants whisper among themselves, noting how the master and mistress are spending their first night in chaos.
Standing in the shadows, a knight reflects on the situation, his thoughts lingering on Doana and the unfolding drama.
Doana lies in a secret embrace with the brown-haired knight, cynical about how the house is currently run.
Walking away with a whistle, the brown-haired knight considers this chaos a perfect opportunity to visit an old flame.
Doana fumes alone, her irritation growing as she touches the lingering scratch on her cheek. Obsessed with her appearance, Doana blames Ross for the hassle of having to constantly hide her facial scar.
Doana reflects on her success in separating Eric from his new bride, though her victory feels incomplete.
Despite her schemes, Doana is deeply bothered by Eric's recent coldness and his lack of attention toward her.
A quick tap sounding, Doana's self-pity is interrupted while she laments that her scar might be repelling Eric.
Bill Cox sounding. Doana swings the door open and is startled to find the brown-haired knight waiting for her.
The knight teasingly scolds her for being reckless, while a stunned Doana struggles to find her words.
Doana erupts in anger, demanding to know why the knight has the audacity to barge into her private quarters.
Dismissively, Doana insists their business is finished, but the knight's smirk suggests he has far more to say. The knight reveals Eric has gone to Ross' room, delivering the news with a sharp, mocking finger.
Reeling from the revelation, Doana's face pales in disbelief as she processes the news of Eric's sudden visit.
A vision of Eric with Roz haunts Doana, fueling her resentment toward the woman she calls a fox. Beidung sounding, the knight physically restrains a hysterical Doana as she vows to confront the couple immediately.
The knight warns that the nanny is guarding the door, but Doana sneers at the thought of a servant.
Kook sounding, the knight pinches Doana's cheek, patronizingly telling her she is talking absolute nonsense.
He warns that the Count is watching, and her life may be at risk if she continues her path.
Burnjuk sounding, the knight lifts Doana, suggesting they focus on preventing Ross' pregnancy while enjoying themselves instead. Sounding, Doana sighs in frustration, realizing she must find another way to secure her position of power. Kong sounding, the door shuts as Doana reluctantly allows the knight to enter her room for the night.
Creak sounding, the bed creaks as the two settle in, their alliance forged in shadows and shared ambition.
Hovering over her, the knight's presence is tolerated by Doana, who finds his handsome face a minor consolation. The knight arrogantly suggests that Doana deserves a better man, specifically someone exactly like himself. Doana stares back blankly, questioning why the knight is so strangely obsessed with the Count's personal affairs.
Jock sounding, a cynical kiss is shared as Doana inwardly mocks the knight for being an utter idiot. To Doana, Eric's status is everything. She believes a low-rank knight could never truly stand by her side. Despite her disdain, Doana considers how she might still make good use of the knight for her own goals. Doana tells the knight to focus, silently promising that she will be the one getting the last laugh. With a wicked smile, Doana relishes the thought of her eventual triumph over all those who oppose her.
Kam pak sounding. Doana blinks awake the next morning, noting a strange, lingering warmth beside her in the bed. Dwi-chak sounding. Doana's eyes go wide with horror as she realizes the knight never left her bed.
Thud sounding. A heavy noise outside startles them, signaling the start of a very chaotic morning.
Busuruk sounding. The knight groggily wakes up, completely unbothered by the noise or Doana's visible distress.
Piok piok sounding. Doana beats the knight with a pillow, terrified that someone will discover his scandalous presence. Well, that's one way to start a pillow fight. A faint meow sounds nearby, catching Doana's attention and causing her to freeze in mid-panic. They both pause, listening intently as Doana urgently tells the knight to get out before they are caught. Kumol sounding. Doana notices something moving under the red cloth, wondering if it's the source of the noise. Fearing a repeat of past tricks, Doana prepares to defend herself against whatever might be hiding in the room. Sha-sha sounding. The red cloth is whipped away as someone shouts in surprise at this sudden intrusion.
Pa-at sounding. A white kitten leaps into the air, and a startled Doana manages to catch it.
Maya sounding. The tiny white cat stares back at Doana, who is stunned by the unexpected visitor. The knight questions if pets are allowed, but a softened Doana defiantly decides to keep the small creature. Doana relaxes slightly, realizing she got herself worked up over a harmless animal instead of a real threat. Holding the kitten close, Doana decides its presence is perfect for curing her growing boredom within the estate. Ma-ah sounding. The kitten purrs as Doana officially names her new white companion Hyung. The scene shifts to the Grand Duke's residence, where a towering stack of books sits near a table. Exhausted from his work, the blonde Grand Duke rests on his sofa, clutching a series of important documents. Tea-talk-talk sounding. The Grand Duke looks up with a sharp, piercing gaze at the sound of a knock. A red-haired knight arrives with a playful golden retriever, announcing that an important letter has arrived from Serviat. Pyoltuk sounding, the blonde Grand Duke suddenly starts in surprise, his focus pulled from the documents in his lap. Sounding. The Grand Duke muses over an urgent letter while resting comfortably on the sofa with his dog. Kong sounding, the golden retriever sniffs the papers as the Duke reflects on Ross' usual business-centric correspondence habits. The red-haired Niran arrives and questions why the Grand Duke has been so preoccupied with specific family matters lately. A charming memory of Roz discussing business with casual grace flashes through the Grand Duke's mind, fueling his obsession. Pasik sounding, the Grand Duke admits that Roz and her unexpected letters have indeed occupied all of his thoughts. Petting his dog, the Duke smiles and promises to be more discreet if his interest has become so noticeable. Naran shifts the conversation, urging the Grand Duke to focus on finding the important necklace instead of the woman. Humchit sounding, Naren looks on with a flash of concern as the gravity of their mission hangs in the air. The Grand Duke falls into a deep silence, contemplating the difficult path ahead regarding their search for the artifact. Kugit sounding, the Duke crumples the letter in his hands, resigned to the fact that drastic actions are necessary. Naran suggests that increasing their search party's numbers might be the only way to finally locate the elusive gem. A narrative vision reveals the Tear of Luna, a gem capable of taming demonic beasts, and why they seek it. A high-ranking elder orders his men toward the Felice estate, suspecting their involvement with the dangerous demonic beast. Su-Irk sounding, the Grand Duke looks down at the crumpled paper, his resolve hardening as he plans his next move. With a calm and steady expression, the Grand Duke instructs Naran to prepare a guest room for an arrival. Tak sounding, a glass is slammed onto the table, punctuating the growing anger within the Belliart household.
Piok sounding, The Marquis fumes over Eric's insults, while the pink-haired mother provides quiet comfort to her daughter. Ju-ung sounding, Roz reflects on how her recent preoccupations allowed Eric to catch her off guard in her own home. Hilcum sounding, the Marquis notices his daughter's troubled expression and offers his unwavering support during this tense time. Ra's mother expresses her deep fear that Roz might be emotionally or physically hurt by her persistent ex-husband. Roz remembers Eric's wedding, realizing her mother believes she still cares, despite her heart being completely closed to him. Firmly, Roz reassures her worried parents that she has no feelings left for Eric, and only fears for them. Ha, sounding, the Marquis sighs in frustration, dreading the possibility of Eric barging in whenever he feels like it. The Marquis leans in close to Roz, whispering a suggestion that could finally provide her with the protection she needs. Beyond Juk sounding, the Marquis reacts with total shock to the news that Roz has been invited to live elsewhere. She questions the propriety of Roz living under the same roof as the Grand Duke while they are still unmarried. Calm sounding, the Marquis explains that they are being backed into a corner and have no other viable choice. The mother remains hesitant, acknowledging the Grand Duke's good character, but still worrying about the potential for social scandal. Turning to his daughter, the Marquis leaves the final decision entirely up to Roze, trusting her judgment and strength.
Ju-uk sounding, Roz considers the weight of the proposal, knowing that leaving might be the only way to protect them.
Visions of poisoning and political danger haunt Roz, reinforcing her belief that she must draw the enemy's attention away. Deu-ru-ruk sounding, Roz' hand brushes the table as she reaches a firm and final decision regarding her immediate future. Roze announces her choice to live at the Grand Duke's residence, despite her father's gentle reminder to not force herself. With a bright smile and a thumbs up, Roz reassures her mother that she will find her own way. A subtle bead of nervous sweat betrays Roz' internal pressure as she prepares for the challenges of her decision. Imagining their future together, the Grand Duke wonders if he and Roz will truly be able to get along. The scene shifts to a tea party where a red-haired noblewoman thanks guests for attending her recent wedding celebration. The noble ladies praise the event, claiming they felt as though they were attending a magnificent royal wedding ceremony. Dalcock sounding, the hostess graciously sets down her tea, acknowledging the presence of the women within her inner circle. Introducing Marchioness Dykart, the red-haired hostess officially welcomes the newest member of their influential and powerful social family. Koktok sounding, the brown-haired Marchioness Dykart bows elegantly, her arrival signaling a shift in the local power dynamics. Sogon sounding, the guests whisper among themselves about the strength of the alliance forged through this new strategic marriage. The red-haired noblewoman announces a special gift from the Marchioness to mark this important and festive occasion. A luxurious handbag from the rare Hermea collection is unveiled, instantly capturing the attention of every noblewoman present. The guests are stunned by the gift's value, noting how rare and precious such an item is in their circle. Marchioness Dykart smiles warmly, urging the ladies to accept the gift as a simple token of her new friendship. Grateful for the favor, the ladies promise their assistance, solidifying their place within the Marchioness's growing sphere of influence. Sisk sounding, the red-haired hostess smirks with cold calculation, viewing the guests as fools and eyeing her next target. Huik sounding, Doana plays affectionately with her white kitten Hayang, seemingly unbothered by the complex schemes around her. Doana pets her white kitten, affectionately questioning if the small creature truly likes her that much. A brown-haired maid suddenly interrupts the peaceful morning, announcing that the former lady of the house has arrived. Doana's face contorts with anger and disbelief at the news of her mother-in-law's unexpected and unwelcome visit. Memories of past humiliations at Eric's wedding flash through Doana's mind as she wonders what the woman wants. Clutching her kitten, Doana coldly asks if the old fox said anything else before receiving word of gifts. Doana remains deeply suspicious, knowing that a visit from the former lady rarely brings anything but trouble. The red-haired former lady arrives with a pleasant smile, warmly calling out to Doana to come closer. Doana approaches with caution while the former lady pats the sofa,
inviting her daughter-in-law to sit beside her. A sudden sigh escapes the red-haired woman as she asks if Dawana is still upset about the wedding. Dawana feigns total indifference, claiming she doesn't even know what the former lady is referring to regarding that day. Dawana flinches as the older woman suggests there was a simple misunderstanding during the wedding ceremony. Inwardly fuming, Dawana mocks the older woman's audacity, refusing to accept the insult of being called mistaken.
Dawana stands up abruptly and yells, demanding to know if the former lady takes her for a fool.
The former lady ignores the outburst and suddenly presents a bright blue gift box to the angry Dawana.
With a calm smile, the older woman urges Dawana to lighten her expression and open the first gift. Dawana skeptically begins to open the package, suspecting the contents are just a way to bribe her.
Dawana looks down with a confused expression as she finally gets a look at the gift inside the box. To her utter horror, Dawana finds the box filled with baby items like small shoes and a teddy bear. The former lady smirks at Dawana's disappointment, clearly enjoying the reaction she provoked with the infant-related gifts. Seeing Dawana's displeasure, the older woman produces a stylish checkered handbag as a second, more appropriate peace offering. Dawana stares at the luxury bag, her greed momentarily warring with her intense hatred for the gift giver. The former lady mentions that every noble lady desires this bag, while Dawana envisions herself flaunting the item. The door opens as a younger red-haired woman with short hair enters the room looking for her mother. The older woman enthusiastically greets the newcomer, referring to the short-haired redhead as her dear new bride. Watching the two women together, Dawana feels a wave of suspicion, certain that the pair is plotting against her. The older former lady clears her throat and addresses the recent tension caused by their past interactions. The older woman explains the wedding misunderstanding again, claiming Dawana simply had the wrong idea back then. Dawana fake laughs, nervously insisting that the past should be left behind as she clutches the new bag. The younger redhead looks contemplative, her calm demeanor hiding her true thoughts about their complicated family dynamic. Dawana slams her hands down in fury when the older woman mocks the dress she wore to the wedding. The two red-haired women sit side by side, appearing as a united front against the increasingly agitated blonde Dawana. Claiming she is unwell because of the baby, the short-haired redhead decides to leave the room. A heavy door slams shut with force, leaving a fuming Dawana alone with her thoughts and the gifts. Dawana desperately wants to flip the table in rage, but knows she cannot afford to offend the former lady. Dawana admits to herself that she is only putting up with this humiliation for the sake of the bag. Dawana stares blankly ahead, her pride wounded, but her resolve to use whatever she can get remaining intact. Dawana grips the checkered bag so hard that her knuckles turn white from the sheer force of her anger. Her anger reaches a boiling point as she realizes the luxury bag is actually a fake, feeling betrayed. The counterfeit handbag is thrown onto the table as Dawana realizes the depth of the former lady's trickery. Overwhelmed by the constant insults and games, Dawana clutches her head, nearly losing her words from the stress. The brown-haired maid enters and expresses concern about abandoning the former lady, further agitating her mistress. A sharp demand for quiet echoes through the room as Dawana snaps at the intrusive and annoying maidservant. Dawana violently grabs the maid's shirt, her face contorted with a manic and vengeful energy. Dawana points a finger and tells the terrified servant to listen carefully to her next words. Dawana declares that the child in her own womb will even become the next count, regardless of anyone's denial. The terrified maid listens in silence as Dawana asserts her dominance and her future place in the family. Dismissing the servant with a gesture, Dawana remains alone, plotting a dark and absolute revenge. The scene shifts to the grand Belliard mansion, standing tall and silent under the morning sun. The pink-haired Marquis paces anxiously, wondering why there has been no response from Grand Duke Artail. A servant suddenly rushes in, calling out for her, interrupting her desperate thoughts about Roze's future.
A breathless servant arrives, interrupting the pink-haired Marquis's worry with news that an unexpected visitor has finally arrived.
Grand Duke Artyom appears in the Grand Hall, offering a polite bow and greeting the surprised Lady Serviette.
The blonde-haired Grand Duke apologizes for his tardiness, but the Marquise quickly dismisses his concerns with a gracious smile.
Eager for a fresh start, the Marquise pledges to have Roz ready to depart for her new residence immediately.
Seek-sounding, Artyom offers a faint, satisfied smile as his carefully laid plan begins to move forward smoothly.
A wave of shock hits the Marquise when the Grand Duke unexpectedly invites her to join them on their journey. Hilcum-sounding, the Marquess and brown-haired Marquis exchange a bewildered glance, unsure of how to react to this strange proposal.
The scene shifts inside a luxurious carriage where the long pink-haired Roze and the Grand Duke sit together in awkward silence.
In a whimsical chibi moment, the parents fret over the tense atmosphere, wondering if this was truly a good idea. Kuhum-sounding, the Marquise clears his throat, expressing gratitude while hiding his deep-seated anxiety about their current situation.
Ku-tok-sounding, the Marquis cautiously probes for the real reason behind the Grand Duke's insistence on their company.
Artyom explains that personally inspecting their daughter's new home should give them the peace of mind they deserve.
Singut-sounding, the Grand Duke suggests this trip is also a rare chance for a final, peaceful family outing.
Roz looks out the window, her heart swelling with the hope of spending some quiet time with her parents.
The Marquis watches Artyom with a sharp, analytical gaze, searching for any hint of deception or hidden motive.
He observes the subtle way the Grand Duke's stern features soften whenever his gaze lands upon the tranquil Roz.
Quack-sounding, a sudden realization strikes the parents, making them wonder if the Grand Duke harbors genuine feelings.
Dory-sounding, the Marquess shakes her head dismissively, terrified that her daughter is being led toward another disaster.
Chua-ak-sounding, the Marquess prepares for the move, while the Marquis remains determined to judge the Duke's character personally.
Noticing the Marquess's nervous perspiration, Artyom politely inquires if the journey has become too much for him to handle. Harum-sounding, the Grand Duke suggests the weary parents rest while he takes Roz to see her private chambers.
Watching his attentive behavior, the Marquess finds herself starting to believe that Roz might actually be safe here.
She gazes at her daughter, Rivera, with a mix of pride and lingering worry about the challenges ahead.
Ju-uk-sounding, the Marquess clenches her hands tightly, her mind occupied by the painful memories of Ross' past heartbreak. She confesses her deepest fear to her husband, terrified that their daughter might be vulnerable to another emotional wound.
Pu-ng-sounding, the Marquis sighs heavily, acknowledging that the shadow of Eric still looms large over their daughter.
Floral imagery surrounds a quiet thought about how the Grand Duke seems different, yet the future remains uncertain.
Artyom and Roze walk together through a blooming garden, appearing like a perfect match to any outside observer.
The Marquess laments how even the brightest young woman can become completely lost when facing the complexities of love.
Chu-sounding, the Marquis leans in and gives his wife a tender kiss, trying to soothe her mounting anxieties.
Hua-ak-sounding, the Marquess blushes as Damon reassures her that their daughter likely takes after her own resilience.
A final decision is made to trust Ross' strength and judgment, letting go of their overprotective fears for now.
Roz smiles warmly, realizing that her parents' concern is simply an expression of their deep and unconditional love.
The perspective shifts to the tranquil, sun-drenched forest surrounding the Grand Duke's vast and beautiful estate. Hey-sounding, Roz enjoys a peaceful moment alone in the garden, petting the large, friendly golden retriever, Finn.
Haljak-sounding, the dog licks her face enthusiastically, drawing a bright and genuine laugh from the relaxed Roz. Tee-up-sounding, a gentle hand reaches down to pat the happy dog, marking a moment of simple, shared joy.
Sao-irk-sounding, Roz tells Finn to stay put while she heads toward the nearby water to freshen up.
Clicking-sounding, she looks back at her loyal companion, convinced that Finn can sense her inner peace.
Geobok-sounding, Roz wanders deeper into the lush estate, her curiosity piqued by a sudden rustling in the foliage.
At the edge of a sparkling blue stream, Roz decides to wash her face,
enjoying the cool, refreshing water. Aserok sounding. A massive, dark hoof crunches the grass nearby, signaling the arrival of an unexpected visitor. Roz turns in startled to find a towering, dark figure standing just inches away at the water's edge. Her eyes widen in pure astonishment as she realizes she is standing face to face with a legendary black unicorn. Stunned into silence, she stares at the majestic creature, wondering how such a mythical beast could possibly be real. Swa sounding. The unicorn's presence releases a strange energy that makes Ross' hand tingle with a mysterious, warm sensation. Seuk sounding. Drawn by an invisible pull, Roz reaches out and gently strokes the unicorn's face, feeling no danger.
Pa-at sounding. The Grand Duke suddenly bursts into the clearing, shouting a desperate warning while Finn barks frantically. His face is pale with dread as he declares the magnificent creature to be a lethal and unpredictable monster. Roz stands frozen in shock, her hand still resting on the supposedly dangerous beast as the Duke's warning echoes. A nervous-sounding Roz grows suspicious, wondering why the supposedly lethal beast didn't try to attack her. A sudden burst sounding, Artyom commands Finn to act, and the loyal dog lunges toward the dark, mythical unicorn. Roz desperately pleads for them to stop, but a sudden slip sounding causes her to tumble toward the water. A massive splash sounding echoes through the clearing as a panicked shout for Roz rings out across the stream. A quick breath sounding as Rose surfaces, while the worried Grand Duke rushes to the edge to check on her. Finn continues to growl fiercely at the black unicorn, his instinct to protect his master overriding any sense of fear. Fearful that the situation will escalate into violence, Roz worries that someone will get seriously hurt in the chaos. A radiant burst sounding follows a strange energy from Roz, causing both the black beast and Finn to freeze. A sudden stillness sounding settles over the garden as the two creatures stand motionless, their aggression completely vanished. Artyom stares in disbelief, questioning how both the monster and his own hunting dog could have suddenly stopped moving. Roz looks up in concern and directs the Grand Duke's attention to his own hand as he reaches out. A soft splash sounding occurs as Artyom pulls Roz to safety while she apologizes for her clumsy, panicked fall. Standing together by the water, the Grand Duke expresses relief that she is safe despite the terrifying encounter. Artyom sighs that she always ignores his warnings, but Roz simply offers a lighthearted laugh at the outcome. A soft whimper sounding comes from Finn as the pair begins to walk away from the mysterious black unicorn. Artyom reflects on how Finn, a monster-blooded hunting beast, rarely obeys anyone, making this unusual compliance even more shocking. A quick sneeze sounding interrupts Artyom's thoughts about Ross's strange influence over the creatures as they head back home. A heavy thud sounding as Artyom drapes his coat over her, insisting they head inside before she catches a cold. A sudden lift sounding catches Roz off guard as Artyom sweeps her into his arms, ignoring her embarrassed protests. He teases that her parents would rush back immediately if she fell ill, making Roz feel coddled like a child. The stream flows peacefully once more, leaving the site of their strange encounter behind in the quiet forest sunlight. A loud sneeze sounding echoes through the room as a shivering Roz wraps herself tightly in a thick blanket. Roz cringes inwardly, lamenting how she ended up showing such an embarrassing and vulnerable side of herself to everyone. A soft clink sounding accompanies a servant placing a warm cup of tea before the cold and weary Roz. Artyom informs her that hot water is being prepared, while a grateful Roz thanks him for his thoughtful consideration. A quiet stare sounding fills the silence as Artyom watches Roz drink her tea, his gaze intense and unmoving. A low hum sounding as Roz feels a strange pressure, sensing the Grand Duke's eyes fixed on her. Setting her cup down, Rose asks the Grand Duke if there is something specific he wishes to say to her. A soft cough sounding escapes Artyom as he admits he was merely worried she might have sustained an injury. A rhythmic crackle sounding from the fireplace provides a backdrop as Roz explains she only fell into the water. Roz questions his earlier urgency, noting that the massive creature didn't actually seem dangerous or aggressive to her.
RTM warns that higher-level monsters feed on human souls and use divine forms to trick people into lowering their guard.
A soft sigh sounding as Roz realizes the depth of the danger she faced, clutching her warm tea with trembling hands.
A brief hesitation sounding occurs as Artyom pauses, seemingly searching for the right words to ask a sensitive question.
The Grand Duke directly asks Roz if she happens to possess a legendary artifact known as the Tear of Luna.
Startled by the sudden mention of the rare gemstone, Roz wonders why such a topic would come up now.
RTM explains that monsters are known to react strongly to special gemstones, suggesting a possible reason for the beast's behavior.
Roz admits the monster's behavior was strange, but remains uncertain about the true cause of its sudden, docile nature.
She playfully remarks that if she had such a valuable gem, she wouldn't be asking him for business investments.
RTM remains pensive, his eyes narrowed as he continues to analyze Ross' mysterious connection to the creatures she encountered. Recalling the auction and the unicorn, RTM suspects Ross might control monsters through some hidden power of her own.
A soft slide sounding as a hand reaches out, moving toward Roz as the tension in the room shifts.
A loud thumping sounding follows as Artyom touches Ross' face, causing her heart to race and her cheeks to flush.
Time seems to stand still as they share a lingering, intimate look, the air thick with unspoken and heavy emotions.
A sudden start sounding as Artyom recoils, his face showing a mix of shock and confusion at his own actions. Abruptly standing up, Artyom clears his throat and prepares to leave, clearly flustered by the intensity of the moment. A soft tap sounding as Roz clutches her cheeks, utterly bewildered by the Grand Duke's sudden and very strange departure.
A sharp exhale sounding follows as Artyom stands alone in the hallway, trying to regain his composure after the encounter.
He leans against the wall, his hand on his forehead, regretting the impulsive and uncharacteristic way he just acted. A sudden start sounding as the red-haired aide appears, curiously asking if anything happened while he was inside with Ross. Artyom carefully reviews documents while the suspicious tiny image of Roz lingers in the corner of his mind. Bu Sewuk sounding, the red-haired aide presents Artyom with a detailed report on everyone Roz has recently met. Pao Lang sounding, the aide explains that Count Eric remains inactive, while Roz frequently visits a maid named Jane. Artyom pauses, his interest piqued by a specific detail on the list that draws a surprised response from him. Questioning her motives, Artyom asks if Roz has secured another business partner behind his back, which the aide confirms. The aide describes a prestigious elite from a baron family, whose sparkling reputation has even caught the emperor's eye. A subtle smirk forms as the aide secretly wonders about Artyom's reaction to this mysterious, middle-aged business rival. Artyom clenches his hand, deeply troubled by the thought of a young, talented man successfully getting close to Ross. The scene shifts to the gray-haired Gwen, who exclaims in disbelief at the audacious proposal placed before him.
Shh, sounding. Roz, disguised as a maid, sternly urges Gwen to keep his voice down in the public setting.
Gwen admits he was shocked by her letter detailing a plan to seek direct cooperation from the princess herself. With a confident smile, the disguised Roz explains how staying ahead of trends is her greatest competitive advantage. Gwen expresses his relief that things are moving forward as they begin to refine their upcoming product strategy. Chua Ruru sounding, Gwen unrolls a large map, ready to dive into the technicalities of their ambitious new project. Hayam sounding, a one-eyed man watches from the shadows as they discuss the future site of their department store. Sitting alone, the eye-patched man contemplates the scale of the department store business being prepared in secret. Ru sounding, he reflects on how Gwen previously rejected a partnership offer from the influential Lord Cedric. He is baffled that a man of Gwen's stature would choose to collaborate with such an unremarkable young woman. Gwen suggests a large plot of land, but Roz insists they need much more space for her grand vision. She describes a revolutionary space where customers can immerse themselves in both shopping and cultural experiences simultaneously. Parallax sounding, Gwen studies the floor plans, realizing the complexity and scale of the structure Roz is proposing.
Jejal sounding, Roz excitedly explains her plans for underground parking, stone stables, and a modern ventilation system.
Ku-ung sounding, Gwen acknowledges the brilliance of her ideas, but begins to worry about the practical hurdles ahead. Miam-chit sounding, Roz pauses, sensing Gwen's hesitation as he prepares to voice a major obstacle to her plan.
Gwen points out the impossible reality that no plot of land that large exists within the capital city's limits.
He warns her that massive excavations would face fierce public opposition and potentially ruin their construction timeline completely. Gwen poses a daring question, suggesting that they might need to look beyond the capital for a suitable location. Bolt-tuck sounding, Ross stands up with a bright expression, seemingly inspired by Gwen's suggestion for a new site. She beams with joy, her eyes sparkling as she realizes the potential of moving their project outside the capital.
The pair walks together through the city, Gwen carrying a bag as they head toward their next destination.
A massive, ornate tower rises before them, marking their arrival at the gateway to the prestigious Artyom territory.
Jinggut sounding, Roz winks, explaining she understands why merchants usually obsess over the capital's guaranteed profit margins.
Gwen is stunned as she accurately lists the benefits of the capital, from wealthy nobles to advanced facilities. Hyo sounding, Roz smiles, her confidence unshaken as she begins to explain the strategic flaws of staying local.
She argues that relying solely on the capital's nobility would make their business far too vulnerable and dependent.
Roz highlights the Artyom territory's unique advantage as a strategic trade hub that connects multiple bordering nations. She points out that the location is perfectly situated to attract wealthy foreign nobles as a new customer base.
A montage depicts the territory's transformation from a war-torn battlefield into a flourishing and peaceful center for commerce.
Hume sounding, Gwen agrees that the lower maintenance fees and broader reach make this territory a superior choice.
Looking at Roz with newfound respect, Gwen admits he was completely wrong to ever consider her a fragile lady. They discuss the local soil quality, with Roz demonstrating her thorough research into the region's unique ground conditions. Gwen chuckles, noting that she speaks with the preparedness of someone who has been waiting years for this opportunity. Roz enthusiastically asks Gwen for his final agreement to move forward with the plan in the Artyom territory. Kuduk sounding, Gwen nods firmly, his full cooperation secured as he fully embraces her ambitious and innovative vision.
Jo Byuk sounding, Gwen walks through the evening streets, carrying his bag with a look of deep professional satisfaction.
He reflects happily on the successful property acquisition, looking forward to a well-deserved rest after a productive day. Gwen notices a mysterious man in a hat sitting on a bench, his presence standing out in the quiet twilight. Approaching the flower stall, Gwen asks the shopkeeper to wrap up a bouquet, feeling lucky to find him open. Bu-Suruk sounding. The disguised eye-patched man asks Gwen who the flowers are for as he handles the bouquet. Gwen smiles warmly, explaining the flowers are for his wife because of the wonderful news he received today. Gwen is suddenly seized and gagged by a masked intruder, letting out a muffled cry. Lavender petals scatter as the eye-patched aide mockingly laments the unfortunate turn of events. Bound and gagged in a dimly lit room, Gwen listens to his captor's cold plans for later. As Gwen struggles against his restraints, a menacing figure looms over him, asking if he has awakened. Lord Cedric stares down at his former merchant, who is paralyzed with shock at seeing his former master. Taking a seat, Lord Cedric informs the bound Gwen that they have much to discuss regarding his recent actions. Cedric brandishes a document, expressing his disappointment that Gwen would betray him for something as trivial as luxury goods. Lord Cedric offers Gwen a chance at redemption, urging him to return to the service of House de Wentz. Gwen mentally refuses, realizing he has already committed himself to a new master than his former tormentor. A sudden thud sounding as Gwen's chair is kicked over, leaving him helpless on the cold floor. Cedric mockingly acknowledges their 30-year history while Gwen lies defeated, his papers scattered across the stone floor. Lord Cedric orders his aide to return the broken Gwen home,
the henchman bowing in silent obedience. Outside their home, Gwen's wife waits anxiously with a lantern, sensing that something terrible has happened. A sharp jingle sounding as the woman drops her lantern in horror upon seeing her husband's battered state. Gwen's wife rushes to his side, frantic with worry over his trembling form and the fresh wound on his face. They retreat inside as the narration reveals a chilling message. The bouquet Gwen carried is intended for the dead. Despair hangs heavy in the air as Gwen collapses at his table, utterly lost on how to proceed. Gwen clutches his hands in agony, realizing Cedric's threat extends beyond himself to his wife and son. His wife notices his deathly pallor while Gwen silently agonizes over a way to ensure his family's safety. The heavy atmosphere is broken by a sudden arrival as a dark-haired man enters the quiet room. Gwen and his wife look up in stunned silence, recognizing the unexpected visitor standing before them. Identifying himself as Cern, the dark-haired man claims he is precisely where he is needed most. Elsewhere, the blonde-haired Roze, disguised as a maid, encourages her exhausted dog Finn to keep walking. Roze stops abruptly, surprised to find the Grand Duke waiting in a place she didn't expect to see him. Artyom stands with his arms crossed, his presence commanding as the disguised Roze recognizes him in the shadows. A soft cough sounding as Artyom notes her lateness, while Roze questions his presence at such a late hour. Rose claims she was merely taking a walk, her eyes darting nervously as she attempts to maintain her disguise. A weary panting sounding as Finn the dog collapses, clearly finished with their long trek for the night. Roze informs Artyom that she has officially secured the site for the department store within his territory. Artyom is visibly surprised by her decision to bypass the capital, prompting Roze to prepare an explanation. With a radiant smile, the disguised Roze claims her primary motivation was to be of assistance to him. Noticing the dog's exhaustion, Artyom kindly suggests they move the conversation inside for the night. Artyom praises her as his greatest business partner, causing the blonde maid to blush with pure delight. Overwhelmed by the compliment, Roze joyfully celebrates being acknowledged as his top business associate. As Roze basks in her success, the red-haired aide watches her from the hallway with crossed arms. The aide scoffs at her pride, mentally labeling her a parasite for thriving off the Grand Duke's influence. Startled by the sudden, hostile energy, Roze spins around to see who is watching her. Roze watches the red-haired man depart, her mind racing as she suspects his true identity is Naran. Later, the pink-haired Rose sits in a garden, her focus drifting as she reflects on the unfolding schemes. Artyom refocuses the conversation on their plan to swap the princess's poisoned cup during the banquet. A montage reveals the intricate details of the assassination plot provided by a mysterious, anonymous letter. Confident in their intel, Artyom suggests a counterattack while Roze looks on with a mix of shock and intrigue. A charming smile crosses Artyom's face as he contemplates the upcoming move against their hidden enemies.
Artyom's intense expression unnerves Roze, who finds his sudden shift in personality both fascinating and worrying.
A soft cough sounding as Artyom breaks the silence, preparing to ask a more personal question. Artyom asks Roze directly if she has acquired a new partner, leaving her momentarily speechless. He points out that expansion naturally requires more help, his gaze searching her face for the truth. Roze admits the addition of a partner, but resolves to keep Gwen's involvement a secret for now. Leaning in close, Artyom asks to be introduced to this mystery partner, his presence feeling overwhelming. Artyom reminds the startled Rose that as her co-investor, he expects full transparency in their shared ventures. Rose looks flustered as Artyom leans close, her heart racing at his overwhelming and intimate proximity. Tada-tada sounding, Finn the golden dog sprints across the patio, leaping excitedly toward the startled couple. Udong-tong sounding, the golden retriever crashes into a chair, sending it tumbling onto the grass. Heoding-jeeding sounding, Roze struggles to restrain the playful Finn, wondering what has suddenly gotten into him.
Roze lets out a sigh of relief, realizing Finn's interruption saved her from an awkward conversation.
Artyom asks if she is all right, noting that she seems to have lost her usual control over the dog. Scolding her little troublemaker, Roz cuddles Finn while Artyom wonders if he previously misjudged her character.
The scene shifts to a white carriage drawn by two horses traveling through a lush green park.
Inside the carriage, the blonde Artyom reflects on the importance of the upcoming banquet for Princess Diana. Looking at the pink-haired Roz, Artyom notes with relief that she has experienced no recent health issues. Artyom finds himself unable to look away from Roz, questioning why he has become so acutely aware of her. Chaotic sounding, Artyom snaps out of his daze as Roz informs him they are nearing their destination. Rose looks stunning in her elegant gown, holding a letter and a single blue rose amidst white flowers. Kuhum sounding, Artyom clears his throat while admiring Roz's radiant appearance before they step out. Artyom offers his hand, inviting Roz to enjoy the banquet she has been eagerly anticipating. Taking his hand, Rose voices her anxiety about making a mistake, but Artyom reassures her of his support. Artyom encourages her to greet the princess with pride, wanting her to feel confident and secure. He reminds her that they are entering the ballroom as confident business partners, sharing a warm, supportive smile. Sung sounding, the grand banquet hall is filled with the low hum of whispers from the gathered nobles. Sung sounding, noble women watch the entrance with shock, their gossip spreading quickly through the ornate ballroom. They recognize Lady Serviat, whispering in disbelief that she has arrived as the Grand Duke's guest once again. The caption notes that her presence confirms their previous meeting at the Wen's wedding was no mere coincidence. Roz notices the stares, but observes that the initial shock of her return has finally begun to settle. Artyom informs Roz he must briefly speak with Diana, checking to ensure she will be fine on her own. Roz playfully teases him for leaving her so soon, her smile bright as she navigates the social scene. Moi sounding, Artyom kisses Roz's hand, a bold public gesture that leaves her completely stunned and blushing.
Kya Ray sounding. The crowd reacts with giggles and whispers as the Grand Duke departs, leaving Roz behind.
Sugun sounding, Roz hides her flustered face behind her hands, feeling overwhelmed by the unwanted attention.
Nearby nobles debate Roz's title, with one man correcting his companion that she is now simply Miss Roz.
Chit sounding, a dark-haired man stops abruptly, his eyes wide with shock at the mention of Roz's name. Chit sounding, the man stands frozen with his wine, his internal monologue confirming his disbelief at Roz's presence. Eric spots Roz and begins to approach her from behind, driven by a desperate need to find her. Talk sounding, Eric roughly grabs Roz's arm, demanding to know what she is doing at the royal banquet. Talk sounding, another hand reaches out to intervene as Eric continues to accost the startled and upset Roz. Rose declares they are strangers, but Eric aggressively insists that she is still his woman despite their past. Sol Yang sounding, the nobles gasp and whisper, shocked by Eric's scandalous and loud public outburst in the ballroom. A noble couple watches the scene with disdain, labeling Eric a lunatic for causing such a scene. Fuming with indignation, Roz reflects on Eric's complete lack of respect and basic human decency toward her. Chit sounding, Eric flinches as Roz prepares to deliver a final public rejection to end his harassment.
Roz firmly states she no longer likes him, announcing that she already has someone she truly cares about.
Eric is paralyzed with shock as Roz glances toward the approaching Artyom, signaling the end of their conversation. Artyom arrives and asks if she is all right, his presence immediately silencing the murmuring crowd of nobles. Reflecting on her past trauma, Roz feels a surge of relief that Artyom appeared to protect her from Eric. Amidst a background of blooming roses, Rose prepares to introduce the man who has truly won her heart. Roz proudly presents Grand Duke Artyom as the man she loves, standing tall and defiant against her past. Sounding, Eric is left speechless and humiliated, forced to finally accept the reality of Roz's new life. Sol Yang sounding, the crowd gossips cruelly, accusing Roz of being a social climber aiming for a ducal house. To Gok sounding,
A blonde woman's footsteps echo as she speaks up, expressing her disgust for the petty gossip. Princess Diana makes a grand entrance, smiling warmly as she praises Ross's honesty and admirable courage.
Diana addresses the stunned nobles, stating that being truthful about one's feelings takes a great deal of strength.
Artyom apologizes for the disturbance while Princess Diana greets the pink-haired Rose, having heard much about her.
Diana suggests they discuss Ross's intriguing plan later at their leisure, leaning in with a secret, knowing smile.
Hwaya sounding, a radiant Ross expresses her deep relief that things went well between her and the Grand Duke.
Took sounding, Diana calls for a toast while the red-haired woman fumes over her son's public humiliation.
Eric watches from the shadows, resentfully blaming the foolish Roz for the messy situation unfolding at the royal banquet. Watching Diana with a servant, Eric coldly resolves that the princess's insolence will finally come to an end today.
A steady stream of wine is poured into a glass as Eric plots to eliminate both Diana and Artyom.
Artyom and Roz raise their glasses to celebrate, unaware of the lethal trap being set within the ballroom's festivities.
Diana takes a sip of the wine as Eric watches with predatory focus, waiting for the poison to take hold.
Jangarang sounding, a glass shatters as Artyom suddenly staggers, Hui Chong sounding before the stunned and horrified crowd. Kung sounding. Artyom falls to the floor bleeding from his mouth as someone cries out for him in desperation.
Roz cradles the fallen Artyom, begging him to wake up while wondering why their prepared plan has gone awry.
Kung sounding, Diana watches in shock as Roz wonders how Artyom ended up drinking the poison intended for the princess. Kung sounding, memories of past loss haunt Diana as she struggles with the fear of losing her family again. Hui Chong sounding, Diana's vision blurs as she begins to lose consciousness, overwhelmed by the traumatic scene before her. Tailsock sounding, a frantic announcement echoes through the hall as Princess Diana collapses amidst the growing chaos and panic. The banquet hall falls into a grim silence as the princess lies motionless on the floor, her golden hair sprawled. Tusk sounding. The emperor looks down from his throne with a cold, disgusted expression as the festive evening turns tragic. The emperor's voice booms through the hall, commanding the banquet to be stopped immediately as the investigation begins. Biful sounding. A trembling servant is roughly interrogated as the search for the one responsible for the poisoning starts. The emperor confronts the terrified maid and servant, who desperately plead their innocence despite the damning circumstances surrounding them. Deguru sounding, the emperor's suspicion is confirmed as a small, striped poison vial is found hidden in the maid's pocket. Sa sounding. A cold dread washes over the maid as she realizes her involvement in the assassination plot is exposed. Puck sounding, the maid collapses in tears, claiming she was merely following orders to hand the princess the glass. The emperor remains unmoved by her pleas for mercy, his expression stony as he contemplates the scale of the conspiracy. The emperor notes with a grim face that the other servant has already bitten off his tongue to avoid talking. Tia Biak sounding, the emperor approaches the vial, offering the maid a single chance to reveal who is behind the plot. He promises the maid immunity and a reward if she identifies the mastermind, his hand extended in a false gesture. Through room sounding, the maid looks up with a sinister, tear-streaked smile, her eyes revealing a hidden, dark intent. Puck sounding, a sudden strike occurs. Ak sounding, as the scene descends into violence while the emperor watches with cold detachment. Kang sounding, a bloody sword falls to the floor as the emperor commands his guards to take the woman away. Pub Biak sounding, a guard reports that Diana shows no signs of poisoning, suggesting she merely collapsed from the shock. The emperor is visibly surprised by the news, questioning why the poison failed to take its intended royal victim. He realizes the plan leaked, causing the poison-resistant Artyom to drink the toxin instead of the vulnerable Princess Diana. Swa sounding, the emperor reflects on his mistake, wishing he had never listened to Duke Felicie's ill-advised schemes.
A montage reveals the tragic royal history and the calculated decision to spare Artyom's life when he was a child. Pwat sounding, the emperor demands immediate reports on Artyom's condition, his mind racing to adapt to the failed assassination. Creak sounding, a door opens as the emperor resolves to meet Duke Felice to handle the emerging political mess.
Determined to contain the fallout, the emperor prepares to devise countermeasures now that the aware Artyom poses a threat. Walking through the palace, the emperor reflects on how Artyom's knowledge ruined the plan to poison the unsuspecting princess.
Ha-duk sounding, the emperor grinds his teeth in frustration, desperate to find a way to fix the disastrous situation.
The emperor heartlessly plans to sell Diana to a foreign king for iron ore, viewing her as a mere bargain. He stares into the darkness, acknowledging that the real problem remaining is what to do about the meddling Artyom. The emperor listens as a voice from outside begs to be allowed to see the poisoned Grand Duke Artyom.
Angel Bujel sounding, the pink-haired Roze is blocked by the palace guards despite her frantic and emotional pleas.
Jabak sounding, the emperor steps forward into the hallway, demanding to know the cause of the late-night commotion. The guard explains that Lady Ross Serviat is insisting on seeing Artyom personally to ensure the Grand Duke is safe.
The emperor observes the distressed Roze, noting her persistence in causing a disturbance within the walls of the imperial palace.
He recalls Ross' previous interference, wondering if this young lady has once again managed to ruin his carefully laid plans. Standing tall, Roz addresses Emperor Festona directly, her presence a final obstacle in his path to absolute control. Roz bows deeply before Emperor Festona, apologizing for her interruption and expressing her overwhelming worry for the poisoned Artyom. The emperor reflects privately on how both the Grand Duke and princess collapsed after drinking from the very same cup.
Pointing an accusing finger, the emperor labels Roz the most suspicious person present for remaining completely unaffected by the poison.
Rose desperately defends herself, explaining she simply didn't drink the wine and was as vulnerable to the toxin as anyone. The emperor coldly dismisses her plea, stating that her defense is merely her own word against the undeniable physical facts. Stunned by the accusation, a tearful Roz finds it absurd that she would ever harm the man she truly loves.
Duok sounding, Roz clenches her skirt with trembling hands, determined not to let them pin this heinous crime on her.
Telsock sounding, Ross collapses in grief while declaring her love for Artyom as the emperor watches her with cold detachment.
Hook sounding, a devastated Roz sobs into her hands, questioning why she would ever seek to harm her own beloved.
Ross realizes with a start that she is using the exact same words she shouted to drive the persistent Eric away.
She hides her face behind her gloved hands, overwhelmed by the tragic irony of her current desperate situation. Ha sounding, the emperor calculates that ruining the reputations of both Roz and the madman Artyom is a perfect outcome. Roz stands before the emperor and admits that her deep concern for the Grand Duke simply got the better of her. The emperor commands his guards to escort Roz to Artyom, and she sighs in relief at having cleared the immediate danger.
Ta-dat sounding, Roz hurries away as the emperor remains with his servant, his expression shifting back to a dark, calculating scowl. The emperor seethes with growing irritation, his inner monologue revealing that the meddling Roz Serviat is really getting under his skin.
Chang sounding, a heavy inkwell is slammed onto a desk as the emperor demands to know how the plan failed.
The emperor rages at Duke Felice and Cedric, blaming them for the failure to poison the princess and ruining the Marquis affair.
Sa sounding, a cold atmosphere fills the room as the emperor demands a justification for the disastrous outcome of their plot.
The silver-haired Duke Felice suggests the failure is no surprise given the incompetent House of Wens. Cedric, the dark-haired man in the red coat, shouts in indignation, finding Duke Felice's dismissive insults to be absolutely ridiculous. Cedric argues fiercely that the divorce was a long time ago and should not be used to justify their current failure. The emperor privately wonders if Roz never loved Eric and only approached the Wens to extract their most dangerous secrets.
A montage reveals Ross' past gathering of intel, leading the Emperor to question the logic of her sudden pivot to Artyom.
Duke Felice mocks Cedric, reminding him how everyone saw his son Eric groveling at Ross's feet earlier that evening.
By Juk sounding, the Duke scoffs that both father and son are fools over women, causing Cedric to explode in defensive anger.
Cedric turns the accusation back on unrelating, claiming the Duke might have deliberately made the assassination plan sloppy.
Cedric further suggests that, as the late king's servant, Duke Felice might have intentionally put the current emperor in danger.
Duke Felice smiles sinisterly, noting that once someone betrays once, a second betrayal becomes much easier for a person to commit.
Quang sounding. The enraged Cedric slams his hands onto the table, shouting at the Duke for insulting his hard-won loyalty.
The Emperor finally shouts for silence, standing over the bickering men as the chaotic meeting reaches a boiling point of tension.
The Emperor admits the leak is astonishing, but finds their mutual hatred and internal tearing apart to be truly impressive.
Fearing total ruin, the sweating Cedric begs the Emperor, promising to do whatever is necessary to keep their secrets hidden.
Axe sounding. The Emperor throws a cup of ink, drenching Cedric as a final, violent gesture of his utter disgust and rage.
Gyoyo sounding. A heavy, oppressive silence falls over the grand room as the three conspirators sit in their mutual failure.
Umjil sounding, Cedric flinches as the Emperor entrusts him with a new task, warning him sternly not to fail again.
Tuk sounding. Ink drips from the disgraced Cedric's face as the Emperor commands him to handle the situation properly.
Tuk sounding, Cedric walks away in a daze, his internal monologue bitterly labeling the manipulative Duke Felice a snake.
Cedric seethes with resentment, wondering how the Duke dared to insult both him and his son Eric so publicly.
Gigi Pull sounding, Cedric finds the dark-haired Eric and tells him it is perfect timing to finally head home.
Quick sounding, Eric turns his back and crosses his arms, stubbornly refusing to leave the palace with his disgraced father. Eric insists he must stay to check on Roze, causing Cedric to stare at his son with a look of pure disbelief.
Juke sounding. The frustrated Cedric demands to know why Eric is so hung up on the woman who wanted their divorce. Eric yells back, accusing his father of being the one who wanted the divorce to secure a better political marriage.
Axe sounding, an enraged Cedric grabs Eric by the collar, screaming for his foolish son to finally snap out of it.
G-Jack sounding, a sharp slap echoes as Cedric tells Eric to move fast if he truly wants to win Roze back.
Eric holds his stinging face in shock as his father commands him to get a grip on the reality of things.
Duck sounding, Cedric grinds his teeth and insists that everything the woman Roze has done is just a calculated act.
Eric stands frozen in stunned silence as his father delivers the final crushing blow that Roze never loved him.